From Toronto to Tokyo, and from Thonia to Syrinx, this is The Basement, your companion to the Ready Player One novel. Join our hosts each episode for complete chapter breakdowns and deep dives into the pop culture references through a series of challenges and homework assignments. The Basement is the Ready Player One podcast for people who love things. And now, please welcome Albert and the rest of the Gunchers for this week's episode. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to The Basement. This is episode 6, part 3 of chapter 6. We're calling this one, And Knowing is Half the Battle. My name is Albert Padilla, and we are back again. This is now, I talked about this a long time ago, but this is going to be about a total of 6 episodes. We're halfway through it, and joining me tonight to kind of bring us halfway to the halfway mark is none other than the community manager from Ear Glue Media, Joe. Joe, how are you doing tonight?
Good, Albert. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for being on the show. I know we haven't seen you since episode 1001, We Die. I haven't had you back on since then, but things going well since then?
Things have been good. Working over at Ear Glue, getting that thing going.
Yeah, whatever that thing is. So for those of you that haven't been keeping up with this episode, maybe this is your first time jumping in, or if you're not following us on Cantina Cast or some of the other episodes, we are now part of the Ear Glue Media Network, so a number of different podcasts that kind of all came together. We were already kind of working together as it was, but we pulled all those together. We've got a fancy website coming up, and since then, Joe's taken on a lot more responsibility than just kicking people out of Discord. So he's been doing, what else have you been doing? Social media stuff as well, too?
Mostly just Discord stuff, a little bit here and there online otherwise, but that's been most of it.
Well, we've got a lot to cover, so we're going to just jump right into it. So just to recap, we are on chapter 6, and what we're going through right now in the book is really just Halliday's journal. There's just tons and tons of the almanac and lots of information about all his favorite books, movies, that sort of thing. When I guess sat down and decided how we were going to break down chapter 6, I opted to kind of mix and mingle a lot of the different authors, the movies, the TV shows, cartoons, that sort of thing, rather than just doing all at once. So this is really if you're reading the book and trying to follow along with the book, you're going to find that we're kind of just jumping around and pulling a lot of the things from that chapter and putting them together for one kind of big show. Eventually, when we get to the very end of chapter 6, we'll pick that up in terms of the storyline and what's really happening, outside of just all the pop culture references. But chapter 6 is just so heavy on pop culture that we've decided just to make this its own kind of thing. So we'll jump right into this and get into the book. So the books that we picked for this episode are J.R.R. Tolkien, which I guess we can talk about who he is, but I think everybody knows. Orson Scott Card and Douglas Adams. So briefly, for Tolkien, he was lived from 1892 to 1973. He, of course, wrote The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, and The Silmarillion, which was a book that came out later in 1977. For Orson Scott Card, he was born in 1951, is still alive today. Most famously known for Ender's Game, which came out in 1985. There were a number of sequels to that. There was Speaker for the Dead, Xenocide, Children of the Mind, and then Ender in Exile, and there's actually a couple, I think there's like 2 more beyond that, but those are the kind of the core books of the Ender series. And then Douglas Adams, again, all these authors have a number of books, but if, anytime any Douglas Adams comes up, everyone thinks of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which was a book that he wrote in 1979. So let's just jump back up. I'm going to ask you the more obvious question, but with Tolkien, did you read those books growing up, and how much, or was the movies the first entry for you, like a lot of people that I know of personally?
I read The Hobbit, but I'd never read any of the other ones. The movies brought me in through The Lord of the Rings. It was tough to want to go back to those books after seeing the movies.
Yeah, I've heard that too. They just don't like there's moments in there, I think, where it's probably not it seems like this is one of those rare instances where it translated better onto the screen than maybe in the book. Not to say that the movies are better than the book, but it just seems like visually it was because maybe that's just a state of the art in terms of where we were with computer graphics and that sort of thing, whether or not that was something that attributed to that, but it just seems like it translated better. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think so. Plus, as great as Tolkien is, some of like the excess detail and I don't want to say long-winded, but
the exposition
can be a bit much. And once you've had the movies as fast and action-packed and exciting as they were with basically the same story that he wrote, it's hard to go back and kind of slowly work your way through the same story.
No, I agree. And you kind of almost feel like, and I hadn't read the books, honestly, in a while since I'd seen the movies. And I had that same experience going back and trying to read them. It's just not, the pacing is not the same. And I'm expecting the pacing to be the same. And well, it's not. So yeah, kudos to Peter Jackson, because he really, I know that was a labor of love for him to kind of really compile all the books together and all the stories and try to really put something that was a little bit more fast paced and cohesive, going into it. I think we had heard a lot about that before the movies came out. But I guess if you had to pick between that one, Lord of the Rings, I guess which series was more important to you, or which one did you enjoy most?
Of Tolkien's work?
Yeah, just between The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings.
I liked The Hobbit a lot when I read it. I don't know if going back to reread it now, if I would feel the same way, but I think if I had to choose The Hobbit, or not the movies, the book, The Hobbit, because I didn't particularly care for the movies. Mm-hmm. But if I had to pick between the book for The Hobbit or the movie Lord of the Rings, I'd probably go with the Hobbit.
Yeah, I'm probably more of a Lord of the Rings person myself, but so let's talk about Orson Scott Card. So now this is one of the ones, and I think if you've listened to the show, I've probably mentioned this a number of times, like Orson Scott Card, and especially Ender's Game, and Ready Player One is one of my favorite books. I don't know that it's become the most favorite for me yet, even though I'm doing a podcast about it. But the Ender's Game still, I think, is probably my favorite science fiction novel. And I just absolutely love the book. I mean, it was one of the first books that I remember picking up, not able to put down. And when I was done, really hoping that someday somebody would do a movie about it. And I had to wait for this long period of time. I mean, think about it. The book came out in 85, and we had the movie out, what was it, maybe 4 or 5 years ago? Hasn't been that long. But that's a pretty long drought there to have to wait for something like that. But, a lot of it, too, is just visually. I think we were waiting for, again, the graphics to kind of catch up before someone could pull that off. But the whole series is great. I mean, Speaker for the Dead, Xenocide, Children of the Mind, Ender in Exile. All those books are amazing. Did you get a chance? Have you ever read any of Orson Scott Card's books here?
No, this is kind of like an embarrassing blank spot for me in my love of science fiction. I never read any of those. Yeah,
they are, and the pacing is really great. It's not, none of these books are really that, well, that's probably not a fair statement, but at least Ender's Game is a pretty simple read. It's pretty straightforward. I think they're even allowing kids or asking kids to read this now as part of like high school and junior high reading lists for summertime, which is kind of interesting because I just never thought that would make the list. But my oldest son is now reading this book, so he's been really getting into it. But yeah, if you haven't had a chance, go take a look at these. Pick up Ender's Game at least and read that one. And if you really want to go, if you're really into it, go ahead and watch the movie. The movie's not that bad. It really isn't. It's not that great, but it's not that bad. It had moments that I thought were very fair to the book. They translated really well. And then there were other moments where it just kind of fell short. It was a little bit slow for me. And not to mention, I'm not going to spoil anything, but there is one huge spoiler in this novel that as you read the novel, it gets, Card's able to pull it off at the very end where you're just completely mind blown. Like, wow, I never saw this coming. But when you watch the movie, they blow it immediately within the first part of the movie. So you don't really get that same kind of experience. So unfortunately, I would have to say that the book is way, way better than the movie here. So, all right, Douglas Adams, 1952 to 2001. So he's been dead for about 15 years. But The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So this is a book that honestly, for me, I never even picked up until like in the 80s. And it was only because of a video game that I'm going to talk about in a second. But originally, this was a radio comedy on BBC in 1978. He came back and then turned that into a book in 1979. And there were a number of, there's a movie that came out recently. I think it was in 2005, maybe 2006, somewhere around there. There was a TV series, which if you have Amazon Prime and you're a Prime user, you can go watch the BBC series that came out. It looks like it was maybe done in the 80s. But it was it's like six seasons, or I'm sorry, 1 season, 6 episodes. And it's a little dated. Graphics are, BBC graphics for television, so there's not a whole lot there, but it's actually pretty entertaining. Had you read any Douglas Adams stuff or Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy?
I read Hitchhiker's Guide when I was in high school, so it's been quite a while.
Yeah.
But I really liked it quite a bit. And I didn't think the movie adaptation was as bad as a lot of people seemed to talk about it like it was. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, it had like Sam Rockwell. It had Martin Freeman.
Yeah, I love Sam Rockwell too.
Yeah. Zoe Deschanel. This is off the top of my head, honestly. I'm trying to remember who else was in the movie. But yeah, it wasn't that bad. It really wasn't. And I don't know why. It's like 60% on Rotten Tomatoes or something. But yeah, it wasn't too bad of it. But for me, I guess like my entry point was really this game in 1984. So they made a text-based game. It was put out by Infocom, which Infocom was, they put out a ton of other text games and had games that were out for PCs back then, or computers. But yeah, that was it was one of the first things that really got me into it. I didn't even know. And this is in 1984. I didn't even know that there was a book or anything out. At that point, I just was playing this text-based game that I thought was always, pretty interesting. The novel is solicited as a trilogy in 5 parts. So there's more British humor for you right there. But it's interesting because the whole premise of the novel is about a gentleman named Arthur Dent, who his best friend, who, he's known for a number of years, is actually an alien. And this, there's like alien race decides that they're going to plow the Earth because they need to build a superhighway. And so they come and make an announcement to the Earthlings saying, "Oh, sorry, you've got about 2 minutes to live. We're going to blow your planet up." And so they get away. They cast away on one of these ships for the Vogons, which is the alien race that decided to do this. And in that process, they get jettisoned from that ship when they're found to be castaway or stowaways on there. And then they're picked up by a ship called the Heart of Gold. And the Heart of Gold is this really fast ship. There's a lot of other better ways to describe it, but belongs to the cousin of the best friend who was an alien. And eventually they meet up with a supercomputer called Deep Thought, which tells them that the ultimate answer to life, the universe, and everything is the number 42. So was that something that you used? Did you ever use this, like nerd out with people and say, oh, when someone asks a question, you'd say 42? Because that still happens with me. And I don't know if I've just got really old friends that do it still. But sometimes when you do it, people don't really understand what the heck you're talking about because they've either never seen the movie or read the book.
Yeah, that definitely would come up when I was in high school. I haven't heard that outside of our group really in quite a while.
Really tight circles.
But yeah, really, really tight circles. But yeah, that came up. That still happens. Yeah.
And it's funny too, because just to take it back to the novel Ready Player One, later on, as you're reading it, when you get to chapter 16, and this is after Wade moves into his apartment in Columbus, Ohio, his apartment is actually located on the 42nd floor, which I don't know that I've ever read anything that confirms that, but I think it's pretty safe to say that Ernie put that in there. And then the other instance where you get that number is Wade's Hab unit. Once he takes that job at IOI, is 42G, which, again, I'm going to just chalk it up to another reference to The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So
I think that's a safe bet.
Yeah, it's probably a safe bet, but it's a good it's a good book. In the game was pretty good. The movie, again, like I said, is not that bad either. So if you want to take a look at that, watch it. It's pretty interesting. Do yourself a favor so you can be part of these really close-knit circles and know what the heck we're talking about when we say 1942. Or sorry, when we say 42, not 1942. All right, so let's move on to cartoons. So we've got 2 cartoons particular that we're going to talk about. The first one's Star Blazers, and the next one is G.I. Joe, which we get our title from for the show, and knowing is half the battle. But first, Star Blazers ran from 1979 to 1984. This is kind of very interesting plot line. So It's basically Earth is bombed by radiation bombs from another planet called Gamelon, and everyone's just is kind of forced to live underground because of radiation levels and that kind of thing. And then out of nowhere, they receive this help from a planet called Iskandar, and Iskandar sends them plans for this space traveling engine called the Wave Motion Engine. And so they take this Wave Motion Engine, they slap it on the side of a sunken World War II battleship, which is called the Yamato, and they turn it into a new ship called the Argo. And they basically travel to Iskandar, where they got these plans. They get a device, and they come back to Earth. They clean up the atmosphere, remove all the radiation, make it safe and livable again outside of that. And then basically the rest of the series is just really about them fighting this space battle between these two. They're kind of, Earth is kind of caught in the middle of these two races that are fighting. And then they have to flee in about a year because the sun's going to blow up. Now, I don't remember why or how. No big deal. The sun's just going to explode here in about a year. But that's kind of the premise of the show. And so this is an older type cartoon. I personally didn't watch it until it was maybe in the 90s, as I was kind of going on this little anime kick. And it was maybe like late 80s, early 90s. And it was really hard to get anime. And you talk to anybody that's been a fan of anime for any number of years, but it is very, very difficult to find this stuff back then. You had a very small selection of what you could see because most of it either wasn't put out or you had to import it, and it cost way too much for shipping, that kind of thing. But the Star Blazers was one of them. That was one of the ones that you could literally walk into a Blockbuster Video, and it was sitting on the shelf with the other 6 anime titles that were available at the time. So Joe, was this something, do you remember this cartoon, or did you get a chance to watch it as part of the homework stuff?
Yeah, my first experience with this was a couple of weeks ago for the show. I ended up finding it on YouTube, and about halfway through the first episode, I was pretty skeptical, but I ended up really actually liking it. I watched like 3 hours of it.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah. The visual style, it's like space submarine, and just something about the way the captain looks. I liked it.
Yeah.
It's definitely something.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not bad. I mean, you're right, because it's a little corny, and the animation is, although there are moments where I think it's really good, and for the time, right? It's dated, obviously. You look at modern day animation, and it doesn't really hold up very well. But given at the time, again, this is 1979 when it first came out, 1984. It's not that bad. It's definitely entertaining, and there's a huge level of suspension of disbelief that probably goes hand in hand with this particular cartoon, but really wasn't too bad. Now, of course, it's based on an anime series called Spaceship Battle Yamato, which there was basically 3 series. They came out in Japan, and there was I think there was like 2 movies as well that didn't make it over here or weren't really part of what we got in the U.S. So when you watch it, if you were to watch all of the seasons that came out here in the U.S., you kind of feel a little bit like you're missing a piece, and that's because those 2 movies never made it out. But yeah, it was interesting. This cartoon it's really weird. It's one of those cartoons, I keep saying cartoons because they are, but anime, sorry. I don't want to offend anybody, but it was one of those animes that really dealt with some grown-up issues. They dealt with like personal tragedy, extinction of humanity, grief of loss in life. Mind you, this is at a time when here in the U.S. they were cranking out, Hanna-Barbera cartoons left and right, not dealing with this kind of thing. And I guess that's always been the case with anime, right? They've always tended to deal with more mature themes and stories, that kind of thing. Where here in the U.S. we're all about anvils and big mallets and funny noises sometimes. But yeah, it dealt with some very adult themes, and which was very different. Did you get to any of those that stood out for you as you were plowing through 3 hours of this stuff?
It didn't seem to get too heavy. I mean, yeah, we're talking about potentially the end of the human race, so it was a little heavy, but I didn't get to anything that was tremendously stand out. But I actually do plan on watching some more of this show. Wow.
You really liked it that much, huh?
It's something. I mean, some of it's really good, and some of it's bad in a good way. There are definitely, like, there's a few scenes with the captain, I cannot remember his name.
Captain Avatar?
Yeah. Giving his speech on the bridge. And when they focus in on him, they just neglect to add faces to the rest of the crew so they're just skin tone circles on top of bodies.
Yeah.
Stuff like that is kind of fun. But I'll probably watch a bit more of it. I like it.
And that we should mention they were part of a group called the Star Force, which they were labeled as Earth's Last Defense. And that name Star Force actually came from the US version. In the Japanese anime, it was actually just Yamato. So they were actually taking that Yamato ship, which we all know, I think, should know that it was a World War II battleship. And so there was actually there was maybe an underlining story there that there was this rebirth of that glorious ship that was going to save Earth and all that. There was a whole stream, like a whole storyline there that got ripped out of the U.S. version that we never got. Because Japan was, in 1979, they were still reeling from all of the, a lot of what had happened in World War II, not only physically to them as a country, but, the rebirth, regrowth, what they were trying to, get back on their feet and that kind of thing. So there was actually a tone there that there was significance. It had weight to it. And that got all ripped out when it came over to the U.S. and we just called it Star Force. So it was interesting enough. So there was a remake in 2012 called Star Blazers 2199, which looks really good. So I don't know if you had a chance to look at this, but if you go watch that, I think what they've done, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but as far as I could tell, Star Blazers 2199 is the exact same voice acting and audio tracks. They've just updated all the animation. So in 2012, so not that long ago, maybe about 6 years ago, it's really good. So it's all new animation, but with all the original voice acting and audio tracks. And it looks way far superior than the 1979 version. Did you get a chance to look at any of that stuff?
I saw it online. I didn't watch any of it. I was looking for the original, but if you're right, if it's just the original stuff with better animation, I might check that out. That sounds good.
Yeah, no, it's definitely interesting. I didn't get a chance to watch much of it, but it is out there. There was a Disney almost made a live action movie of this. There was a Space Battle Yamato in 2010. I forget now who released that one. But they are actually looking at releasing this again. So even as recently as, in 2011, they had tagged Christopher McGuire, he's a writer, a director. Most recently he's done the most recent, Mission Impossible movie. Is it Ghost Recon? Is that the one that just came out this year? I think it is. If it's not, whatever the one is, so this is 2018. If you're listening to this 5 years in the future, 2018, whatever the most recent Mission Impossible movie is, that guy that directed it is named Christopher McGuire. Mr. Christopher McQuarrie. McQuarrie is actually been tagged to do maybe direct a live action movie of this. And he was asked not that long ago about where he was with this. And he said he was waiting for this Mission Impossible movie to be completed. And then once that was done, he'd get back into the blocks and start writing. So I don't know. Maybe we'll get.
That could be cool.
I can see where it could be cool. It's very interesting. I'd be very interested to see how they're going to pull that off. Although, weirder things have been done, but I don't know what direction he's going to take it in and all that, how true it's going to be to the original or if it's just going to be in name only. I don't know much about this guy either in terms of what his fandom is. If he's a, diehard, dyed-in-the-wool kind of fan, or if he's just, trying to collect a paycheck and someone threw it in front of his desk and he's like, yeah, sure, I'll do this Space Star Blazers. Right. So we'll see. Maybe he'll pull that off. All right. So this one should be close to your heart, given the title. But G.I. Joe, Real American Hero, is a cartoon that ran between 1983 and 1986. It was only 3 years, which, according to my childhood, it seemed like it ran almost my entire childhood, like through the 80s. But surprisingly enough, only 3 years. It, of course, gets its origins from G.I. Joe. So G.I. Joe, if you don't know, in the 60s was originally this a gentleman by the name of Stan Weston came up with the design in 1963 for these action figures, and they weren't called dolls. Right? Can't call them dolls because they're going to boys, but they were basically action figures, and they were labeled as America's movable fighting man. Then, and I think originally there was three. There was Rocky, who was the Marine. There was Skip, who was the sailor. And then there was Ace, who was the pilot. So that was the 60s. Not a whole lot to speak about there. And the 70s, this is where I think I remember a lot of pulp culture references to the Kung Fu grip on G.I. Joe action figures. So in the 70s, we got these 12-inch figures. This was the next evolution. And of course, this is in the wake of Vietnam War. But they had a Kung Fu grip. There was also, we got our first African-American action figure in this line. And some of them had this thing called eagle eye vision, which basically the eyes just moved around as you move the action figure, which just looked super creepy. But it wasn't until the 80s that we got our 3.75-inch figure. So the 80s is where we got the figures that I think we all knew and loved. It definitely tied right back into the cartoons. And it was interesting enough that they went from a 12-inch figure to a 3.75-inch figure. Any guesses as why they shrunk the size down?
I have no idea.
It's a little movie called Star Wars. So they were, so Star Wars had come out, and obviously their figures were 375, and they were just riding, honestly, that wave of popularity.
Smart.
So yeah, no, smart. I mean, it paid off, and that's what I mean. That 3.75-inch figure even today, you can still go into stores and they've got that particular size. It's just they kind of set the standard there at that point. But yeah, they were just kind of following in behind Kenner and Star Wars action figures, which again, this is 1982. So yeah, we're at the height. We're almost at the very height of Star Wars action figures, probably just 1 year past that. Yeah, and again, they tied this back to the TV launch. So they had the cartoon that came out. There was a Marvel comic book that came out, and then in total, this toy line ran from 1982 to 1994. So they did 12 years worth of action figures and vehicles. In total, there were 500 figures and 250 vehicles. All right, so did you play with G.I. Joe action figures and toys? And second follow-up question to that is, how big of a fan are you with the cartoon?
I had a small bundle of hand-me-down G.I. Joe toys when I was younger. I couldn't even tell you who they were. They were pretty beat up, but I loved them, and also beat them up worse. But they were good for fun. My original introduction to the cartoon itself was actually a web series of comedic redubs of old G.I. Joe episodes. And
blasphemy.
I know. But I have gone back since then and watched some, and I did like it.
What was the web series that you're talking about? Do you still remember?
I do not remember. It was very silly, and
because there was one that came out. And I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think there's one that came out that I want to say got pulled. Like Hasbro or whoever sent out a letter of cease and desist for those, if I'm not mistaken.
It would not surprise me if we were on the same yeah. one here.
Yeah, and I never saw them. I just remember that came up during the time when they were out. It wasn't maybe in 2000s or so. I don't know. I forget now. But
it would have been about right, early 2000s. I would have been in high school. So
yeah, I think it's the same series. That's interesting. That's how you got pulled into G.I. Joe. All right. So did you get a chance to watch any of these before, or I guess ahead of the show?
I watched a few clips on YouTube, but I didn't get into the show much. I was pulled into Star Blazers too much.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, you picked the wrong show, because this was the better cartoon. No, I'm just kidding. So G.I. Joe. So this was an interesting one for me, because this is where some of my memory, believe it or not, gets a little foggy. When G.I. Joe came out, there were originally it was just a mini series. So they had these 30-second animated commercials, and it was cartoons that were put out by Sunbow and Marvel Productions. The animation was by Toei, which was you should know them because we talked about them probably in the last episode or the one before. But they're the ones, the same three groups, companies that did Transformers, the cartoon Transformers at the time in the 80s. But this is where it's a little foggy for me. There was did you ever watch the Bozo Show?
No.
You have no idea what the Bozo Show is?
Not even a little bit.
Well, that's it. Thanks for joining us tonight. We'll see you guys. All right. So the Bozo Show was this it was a live action clown show that would come on Saturday morning. Well, it came on every day, really, up north. man, how do I describe the Bozo Show? It really was a bunch of clowns that would come on, and they would have like the grand prize game. So they would have like a studio audience. The kids would go out there. They'd play this game called the grand prize game. And if they could throw these balls in a bucket, they'd win all these, a brand new bike or whatever prizes. There was songs, there was gags. They would show these cartoons.
This sounds like nightmare fuel.
Yeah, it really is. It's playing with fire. But there was a moment at one point where I know that they were showing these 30-second clips, and I don't remember if it was for G.I. Joe or if it was for Transformers, but one, if not both of them, were on, I promise you, during the Bozo Show, and that was my first exposure. And again, this is before the cartoon was actually even out, so they weren't even showing. You couldn't watch the cartoon anywhere. They just happened to have it exclusively on the Bozo Show. So when this came on, I mean, this was like, one, it's a complete departure from the actual, the Bozo Show in every possible way. But on top of that, here we go with this animation, which was just amazing, right? We didn't get some of the animation for like G.I. Joe and Transformers because it was, coming out of Japan. They really got into some very cool shots, imagery, a lot of the what's it called? The perspectives, the force perspective and that sort of thing with the cameras. All that stuff, we never got any of that in some of our U.S. cartoons at the time. So it was it was just so different and so refreshing as a kid that this was one of those cartoons that I just took in, hook, line, and sinker completely. The 5-part miniseries that came out in 1983 was called The Real American Hero. They did a second 5-part series called The Revenge of Cobra. And again, this could be what I'm talking about. It could be the series. I just don't really recall anymore which ones they were. And then finally, after those two miniseries came out, they launched the full run of the cartoon. Now, I did talk about the cartoon being great and the animation. I will say, like the Transformers, there's a lot of inconsistencies here where, sometimes things just didn't look right. Characters weren't completely drawn. Maybe they had the same problem with Star Blazers, but probably not the same. But there, sometimes things weren't really drawn the way they were supposed to. Sometimes a particular voice actor would be talking, and then when they showed the character, it wasn't that character. It was the character next to them that was their mouth was moving, that kind of thing. And the reason why is because this cartoon was really primarily driven for selling action figures. I mean, that was their whole marketing plan is we'll sell action figures, we'll release them, and then we'll just cut these cartoons to introduce all these characters and get kids to buy them. So once that machine got rolling, they had a hard time keeping up with the animation, and really the quality and the consistency just took a hit. They were getting choked out. There was just too many action figures, too many toys being released. Some of the schedules that they were trying to adhere to, the Toei, the company in Japan, they couldn't even keep up with the release schedule. So we got a lot of inconsistencies here at times where sometimes the animation looks really good, sometimes it looks rushed, sometimes it looks super lazy. Which again is very reminiscent of the Transformers stuff that we saw at the time. But one of the really great things about it was the voice acting. I mean, they had, like we talked about on the Transformers episode, they did a lot of characters, or all their characters had a personality. There was Shipwreck. He was the Navy guy. Snake Eyes was the ninja dude. You had Destro, Cobra Commander, which was really just Starscream. You had Baroness, Spirit, Footloose, Sartan, Serpentor, Duke. I mean, at one point we even got Sergeant Slaughter. You remember Sergeant Slaughter from WWF?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good. We got that one. Yeah. So Sergeant Slaughter was in this as well. He was a wrestler for WWF, and then he made the transition, I guess. If it's a transition, he made the transition into cartoons, and they used his character, his likeness, and the name itself to put out a G.I. Joe cartoon. But every one of them had their own kind of personality, their own quirks and all that. So it was just really neat. It was a great cartoon that almost felt like it felt like it ran a lot longer than it did. And, looking back retrospectively, it really didn't get a chance, didn't run very long. So any of those characters stand out for you? Did you look into any of the characters at all?
The biggest one for me, I don't remember specifically which one it was, but I had a Cobra Commander toy that I was pretty in love with when I was younger. I couldn't tell you exactly which one it was because my memory is a little foggy at this point, but that would be probably the only one I have any like legitimate connection to.
The Cobra Commander was always an interesting figure because you had two variants. You had the Cobra Commander wearing the hood, and then there was a Cobra Commander that had the helmet on. Do you remember either one of those?
I'm pretty sure I had a helmet.
Okay. So, yeah, I was going to ask you which one you liked more. Did you like the one without a helmet or the one with the hood? I was more of a hood guy. I don't know why. It just scared me more.
I would be a helmet guy. I've always liked helmets.
Yeah, he's got one of the cool helmets, too, because it's just like completely, chrome or whatever metal that was. I actually have a Lego action figure of Cobra Commander, and he's sitting right here with me tonight. That's good luck.
Doesn't surprise me even a little bit.
Yeah, he's actually sitting next to Chewbacca, and then next to Chewbacca is Zorn from the X-Men, who's actually Magneto. So if you've not read that comic book series, I've just spoiled it for you. Anyways, so one of the cool things they did for G.I. Joe is this is where it gets kind of a little bizarre. They had these public service announcements. So at the very end of the cartoon, you got this 30-second quick episode. You get this 30-second little public service announcement that they had done in conjunction with the National Child Safety Council. In total, there were 35 of these things that came out. And basically, it was every one of these had a character from G.I. Joe. They had some kids in some kind of nefarious situation, right? Scrupulous situation. And, there was always one kid who was kind of like the more reasonable kid, or the one that had the conscience itself. And the character from G.I. Joe would come in, basically teach him a lesson. And at the very end, the kid that was having a problem or was having a struggle would then say, "And now I know." And then the G.I. Joe character in response would say, "And knowing is half the battle." And then you would get the G.I. Joe, and then you get the public service announcement. You'd see the National Council Safety little text there. And again, that's where we get our title from, "And knowing is half the battle." Did you watch any of these? Because there's a lot of them. And honestly, you could get through these in about 10 minutes.
No, I did not dig up any of the public service announcements, but that is such a product of the times. Immediately, your description of it reminds me of the end of like every episode of Masters of the Universe and their little life lessons. Remember, kids, do this kind of thing.
Yeah, it is very similar to that. The probably not, there's not as many sexual innuendos, but definitely the same thing was happening here. Some of the ones that stood out, some of the ones that I think I remember the most is like Shipwreck was a character I really liked a lot. Same thing with Snake Eyes. But there was one with Shipwreck where he's basically talking to a kid about running away. So the kid's, he's upset that his mom and dad, ticked him off, and he's running away, and Shipwreck comes in and basically tells him, "Hey, don't do that." And he's like, "Oh, maybe I should try to talk to my mom and dad." And he's like, "Yeah, now you know. Yeah, knowing's half the battle." That one was good. They featured one on kidnapping with the character of Wild Bill, who was a stereotypical hick, for lack of a better term. They had a stop, drop, and roll one, what to do if you catch on fire. That had Spirit, who was a Native American Indian, a G.I. Joe character. He was always cool.
I think I've seen the kidnapping one. I don't know why describing it, I had immediate like flashbacks to it.
Yeah. Oh man, some of these are great, and some of them are absolutely terrible. There's a character named Roadblock in G.I. Joe, and he was always like the poor man's Mr. T. Unfortunately, he was a cool character, and he didn't look like Mr. T at all. But it sounded like they were really trying to go with the pity the fool kind of voice most of the time with him. But there's one where he tells him not to go down near, or don't go near downed power lines, which I guess was an epidemic in the 80s. I don't know why they had to put one out about not touching down power lines, but okay. They had some with don't touch pets, strange pets. Wear protective sunscreen, that kind of thing. Don't cross railroads. What to do if your house is on fire. What to do if someone passes out. Eating the right foods, listening to yourself with Flint. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. If you get a chance, go watch these. There are a couple of videos out there on YouTube where they've compiled all 35 of them. So if you absolutely have nothing else to do and you want to sit here and watch all of the public service announcements, again, they're only about 30 seconds long. So you can get through them in, pretty quick relative time. So maybe about 7 minutes, my math is right. I don't know. I have no idea what I'm talking about now. But yeah, they're really corny, really cheesy, and pretty fun to watch. But we'd be remiss without talking about the breakfast cereal, because I've posted this breakfast cereal on in Discord a number of times in the cereals channel. And there's, even if you go to like the basement Instagram page, I've got like some videos on there, and one of the videos I have is cereals, and I've got the commercial for the G.I. Joe cereal. But this is another one of those crap cereals that came out from Ralston, and it was called G.I. Joe Action Stars. And the boxes had, there was one that had Duke, Gung Ho was on one of the boxes, and then Shipwreck. And then inside, I don't remember them really doing a whole lot of different like prizes in the cereal boxes. I just remember that it seemed like it was always a comic book, and it always seemed like I always got the same freaking comic book every single time. It was like one of 8 issues, and I always got issue 3. So it wasn't even like the first one or the last one. I got stuck in the middle, and regardless of how many boxes or how many years passed, I'd always get that same particular comic book every single time. But did you? Well, were you alive when this cereal came out? I don't think you were.
I don't think I was.
All right, so you probably didn't eat it.
No, I don't think I did.
Yeah, so this was like they were completely exploiting children to eat all these different cereals based on cartoons at the time, Saturday morning cartoons and toys that had come out. So, and we've talked about this, so we won't get into a Ralston and cereal topic or conversation, but if you get a chance, go check out the video for that and look at the cereal itself. It really wasn't anything that, I don't even know. It was like honey and corn, crispy corn. I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking of Mr. T cereal, but it was basically the same cereal that they did for that one as well.
Yeah, if it's not Fruity Pebbles, it really doesn't matter.
Yeah, well, let's not kick that debate up again. All right, any final thoughts here on G.I. Joe before we move on to our directors for the show?
No, I think we should go ahead and get on to the next.
All right, so we got Peter Jackson and Quentin Tarantino. So Peter Jackson, born in 1961, still alive and kicking. And of course, we got Quentin Tarantino, born in 1963, 2 years later, still alive and kicking. So I just kind of threw this out there. Let's talk about Peter Jackson first. I just asked, what, as a director, what is a movie, I guess if you had to pick one of the movies that he's done, which one would you label as your favorite and why?
For me, it would probably be Fellowship of the Ring. I liked that an awful lot. Maybe it's because it was the first intro to the greater Lord of the Rings universe to me.
Yeah.
But that one really stuck with me.
Did you go see that in the theaters?
I did.
Were you one of the guys or people that waited in line for like days when it came out?
No, I didn't. I've never waited in line for a movie.
Yeah, me neither.
I think that might be a suspect statement there.
Yeah, no, I've done it many times. I've actually pitched a tent for a movie, but we can come back to that in a minute. So, but Lord of the Rings, so when that movie came out, and I don't even know if I have a favorite. I'd probably go with Lord of the Rings as well, because it was such a historic moment for me, because of the one, having read the books. 2, I was really into D&D at this time. I think I was playing Dungeons & Dragons 3rd edition, which was the version that was out at the time. So I had a gaming group that was a tabletop gaming group that was pretty close knit at the time. And when the movie came out, we were all over this. And I remember waiting in line for this movie, and I maybe did it. Okay, so I didn't wait like a day, any more than a day. It wasn't that long, but it was a number of hours. Take the day off from work kind of thing and go camp out there early in the morning. But I wasn't the first person in. Like, there were still people ahead of me. And the craziest thing happened to me in the theater. So we were in the theater. This is the first showing. It was like a 7. No, it was later. It might have been like 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock showing or something. And again, this is before you could reserve seats online. So you had to go, you had to get up early, wait in line so that you can get, your good seats and that kind of thing. But at one point, there was this one guy, the guy that was the very first person in line to see this movie was dressed like an elf. So he had like silver hair or whitish silver hair. He had like an elf suit of costume or some type. This is probably predates cosplay too. But he was in there. He goes and sits like the row in front of me. So I get like right in the middle of the theater. He sits in the row right in front of me. the movie starts and he's pretty quiet, like, very quiet. He's laughing and, everybody else is having a great time. The movie's awesome. We get to the part where Legolas just starts going off and firing arrows at the orcs towards the very end. Dude stands up, he whips out a plastic bow and then turns around to the audience and then starts pulling back like he's firing arrows at people in the audience while we're watching the movie. It was like the most distracting thing because we couldn't, like, everybody, he drew everyone's attention from that moment, that scene, to him so that we could see him fire this little plastic bow and arrow that I'd never witnessed anything like that. Like, I didn't realize somebody would be that huge of a fan going into this, much less a Legolas fan. Because, I mean, Legolas is a cool character, don't get me wrong, but the Legolas, for me, is got a very different, I have a different perspective on him after the movie than I did reading the book. He just wasn't as cool because I visually couldn't see some of the stuff that Peter Jackson made him do in the movie. So anyways, I've rambled on enough about that, but Lord of the Rings, any other movies that Jackson did that were maybe second or honorable mentions for you?
I think if you exclude the Lord of the Rings series, there's not really a time. I mean, I liked King Kong, but I didn't love it. And that kind of wraps up most of what he's got that I've seen. But he did really touched magic with the Lord of the Rings movies. Just the scale and grandeur of them was really something. I mean, I think I was either in 7th or 8th grade when Fellowship of the Ring came out. Mm-hmm. And it really was like mind blowing to see.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I would agree. The other movie that he did, I think, is Heavenly Creatures, which is a movie that came out in 94. Not a movie that I would go out and actively try to watch. It was one of those movies where, you're up, you're late at night, TV's on, Heavenly Creatures. What is this? Oh, wait. This movie has Kate Winslet in it. Okay, yeah, I'll watch it. But it's actually really, really good. It's arguably better than the Lord of the Rings, to be honest, in terms of what he did with the direction. But it's a great movie. He also produced it. He had a hand in writing. I think there was a lady by the name of Fran Walsh who did most of the writing, if not all of it. But he definitely contributed to all three of them. So, but yeah, if you get a chance and if you like Peter Jackson and you want something a little bit different, a lot different than Lord of the Rings or King Kong, check out Heavenly Creatures. He also did Lovely Bones in 2009. That wasn't that bad of a movie. I actually enjoyed that one as well. But let's talk about Quentin Tarantino, because this guy had a lot of influence for me in my life. But again, Quentin Tarantino, 1963, he's got a lot of movies out there, and he's written a lot of movies as well. But if you had to pick one as your favorite, what movie are you going with?
For me, it'd be Pulp Fiction.
Okay, you can stay on the show. Keep going.
That movie is something special. It's really good, and I don't think there's anything that I would really complain about with it. I was probably a little young when I saw it the first time to be taking in a lot of what's in that movie, but but I like it a lot.
Yeah. So yeah, Pulp Fiction, 1994. So I was much older than you at that point, but in 94, that was I would agree. It's a very, very special moment. This is a movie so Reservoir Dogs came out in 92, and I had seen that movie in the theaters. I didn't see it when it first came out, but I caught it when it was still running, and there was a lot of hype about it in the newspapers. That's funny. So yeah, in newspapers, there was people writing up stuff about it, talking about how great it was. Word of mouth had spread. This was 92. This is like my high school senior year at that point. So I was really into this because I wasn't sure at the time I was, into theater and acting, singing, all that kind of thing. And so this is, here comes this movie called Reservoir Dogs that was shocking. It was shock horror kind of thing. And the writing itself was way different than a lot of what had ever been put out before, at least that had been mainstream, right? Because some of this stuff like Pulp Fiction and Reservoir Dogs, those types of movies that had been out for a while, and they were really huge in Hong Kong. Japan had cranked out a lot of them, and those were coming over to the U.S. So for us that were, I say us, people that were kind of following Hong Kong cinema at the time, Japan cinema at the time, seeing Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction really wasn't that different than what we were seeing from those countries. But it was the first time we were getting it from a U.S. An American writer and director. And really, if you go back and look at Quentin Tarantino's influences, that's where he was getting a lot of his influence. He was getting it from the John Woos and the Wong Kar-wais and those guys that were cranking out this stuff. He was a huge fan of it, and that kind of influenced, these particular movies. So again, so Reservoir Dogs had already been out. I had seen it, fallen in love with it, thought it was an amazing movie. And then when Pulp Fiction came out, it was one of the ones that, like, I remember opening when that movie was in theaters for that first night. I was in line ready to go, and it blew me away in so many different ways. The writing's amazing, the directing's amazing, all the actors do an amazing job at portraying their individual characters themselves. But then even like the way the story was put together, right? It doesn't follow the normal A to C and from A, B, and C kind of path of a movie. They jump around. He mixed all of that up as well, so it was very different than a lot of the stuff that we had seen at the time. Any particular scenes that you can say on a show that kids listen to that stood out for you from Pulp Fiction?
My favorite scene is definitely Samuel L. Jackson interrogating the crew of guys over
at the apartment with
the
Brett.
apartment. Yeah. Samuel L. Jackson's awesome in that scene.
Yeah,
I don't know that I would mention much more of that movie on a family-friendly podcast, but it's pretty good. I don't know. Have you seen the link between Pulp Fiction and the Kill Bill movies?
I know they're out there, but I haven't really followed some of that stuff, and I think there's even more too, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe I know in Kill Bill 1 and 2, but I thought there was a Jackie Brown connection as well somewhere buried.
There's also, do you remember the scene with Mia Wallace talking about the pilot she was on for Fox Force 5? And
right.
the 5 agents she describes are from
Kill Bill.
Are from Kill Bill, yeah.
Yeah, I'd seen that. Has that been confirmed, or is that just still kind of like a...
I believe I saw somewhere that Tarantino had commented on it. I might be wrong though.
No, I think it makes sense, honestly. And that's such a cool part in the movie of Pulp Fiction as well, when she's explaining all of that. It's a very sincere moment for her, because she's Mia Wallace at the time in that movie. She's got a stigma about her that's not really true to her character or true to her. Right? Everybody thinks she's a particular person because she's the girlfriend of Mr. Wallace. And so when she comes out and explains all that, she really kind of opens herself up, makes herself vulnerable in that movie in that particular moment. And what stood out I think for me in that particular thing is just not so much the character itself, but again, it's just the way she was able to kind of put down the guard, so to speak, in that scene. So it's really cool that he ended up taking that story and turned it into something else later. And I would agree. There's a lot of stuff in here that we probably can't talk about, but and I definitely recommend the movie to anyone that hasn't seen it. If you, it's a little bit more violent than movies you're probably used to seeing. Although relative to today's movies, it's probably not that violent. It's got some pretty gruesome parts in there. Anything else though from Quentin Tarantino besides Pulp Fiction? Have you seen a lot of his movies before?
Yeah, I've seen a fair number of them. I am blanking on the title of it now. I really liked his half, the car centric story in the Grindhouse movie.
Yep, Death Proof.
Thank you. Yeah, I really liked that. That was good.
Yeah, that one that's some of his best stuff. Honestly, there's really little that he's done that I haven't enjoyed. I mean, Jackie Brown was awesome. Kill Bill 1 and 2, Grindhouse, Death Proof was great. Inglourious Bastards just is one of those movies I can watch anytime, anywhere.
Over and over. Yep.
Over and over again. It's just that good. Django Unchained is another one that's it's hard to watch at times just because of what's happening and that sort of thing, but it's just a great, great movie. And then The Hateful Eight, which I think is one of his more recent movies. was actually pretty good as well.
Yeah,
So
I just saw that for the first time a couple of months ago.
it's got some good moments in there. But yeah, he probably hit it out of the park with Pulp Fiction. Arguably, I think is probably his best one that he wrote and directed. And there are other movies too. Like I said, he's written like True Romance and some of these other ones he's written, but he didn't direct them. There's From Dusk Till Dawn. He wrote that, but it was Robert Rodriguez that ended up directing that one, which I still think is a great movie. It's funny and kind of weird at the same time, but yeah, he's a great guy. All right. Anything else about Quentin Tarantino?
No, I think I'm good on Tarantino.
All right, let's talk about Revenge of the Nerds. Was going to be our first movie here before we get into some music and then Star Trek Deep Space Nine. But Revenge of the Nerds, 1984, directed by Jeff Canu. Stars Robert Carradine as Lewis, Anthony Edwards as Gilbert, Timothy Busfield as Poindexter, Andrew Cassasi as Wormser, Curtis Armstrong as Booger, Larry B. Scott as Lamar, Brian Tochi as Takashi, Ted McKinney as Stan Gable. There's a lot of people in here. Donald Gibbs as Ogre, and just a crap ton of other actors. But I should mention James Cromwell, is in this movie as well. He plays Lewis's father at the very beginning. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen this movie, and I don't know why, but it was as part of the show prep when I was like, oh, I have an excuse now to go watch it again. It wasn't until I watched it like a couple weeks ago that I realized that was James Cromwell. I don't know why he never stood out to me, but that's the dude from Babe that plays Lewis's dad at the very beginning of the movie. So I'm going to throw a question out there. Is this the definitive nerd movie from the 80s?
I think from the 80s it probably is. It's tough for me. I've seen this movie a couple of times. I really like it, but it's a product of such a different time.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah, that's fair. You haven't seen Zapped, have you?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. All right. Well, okay, we'll come to that in a second. But yeah, it really is. So I get what you're saying, because it is the 80s, and we've talked about the 80s movies are just different in a lot of different ways. And I'll talk about that here in a few minutes, but it's I would agree it's probably the definitive nerd movie of that genre of that time. I would throw in Revenge of the Nerds, Weird Science, and then Real Genius, right? That's kind of the holy trinity in terms of nerd movies that came out. But there are other nerd movies that had really come out at this time as well, like Zapped, which had Scott Baio in it. If you're not familiar with Scott Baio, he was from Joni Loves Chachi. He was on Happy Days as that character. Later on, he would do Charles in Charge. Did you catch any of that? No.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. So
did you really? All right.
A little bit of all of the above, but not a lot of any of it.
Yeah. Okay. So Scott Baio was in this movie called Zapped, and if you go watch that movie, if you really want to be like, what the heck was going on here? Because it is another nerd movie, and we won't get into it in terms of what that is, but My Science Project is another one that came out at that same time. And in fact, that one came out right around the same time as Back to the Future and Real Genius. That year, we got all three of those movies. So My Science Project, Back to the Future, Real Genius all came out at the same time. And they all, again, are dealing with this, science. It was kind of cool at the time. And then if you really want to go out on a limb and you want a movie that was dealing with nerds, that's probably like, it's like Revenge of the Nerds meets Porky's. Or I don't know what you would go, but there's a movie called Joysticks that came out, and it's a horrible, horrible movie that's really just about showing women off in you know what I mean? Again, if you think about Porky's, yeah, that's what it is. So go look at the trailer, if nothing else. It's really bizarre and just a horrible movie, but it seems like they were trying to ride, the coattails and the popularity of these nerd movies at the time. Excuse me, but there are some video games in there. We're not going to talk about Joysticks, but there are some. It was one of the movies when I watched it. One, I shouldn't have been watching, and then two, there were a number of video games that I was like, because I was young at the time, I was more interested in the video games that they were showing in this movie than the women in this movie. So yeah, Joysticks is a terrible movie. It's a cult favorite now, but yeah, came out right about that same time. All right, favorite moments and quotes. So anything stand out for you just go with the quotes first off, or we can combine them, the moments and quotes from the movie.
I don't know that I could pull a favorite single quote from the movie. I guess I kind of just like almost everything that Booger does. He's kind of this gross thing, but
Yeah.
I think that's where I would go.
Yeah, they have there's actually a YouTube video out there where they've compiled all of Booger's famous quotes. And it's a compilation of not only Revenge of the Nerds 1, but some of the other movies as well. But yeah, he's got hands down the best stuff, the best lines and stuff in the movie. What about moments for you in there?
Now I hope I'm not confusing the first and second movie now. The Funhouse thing at the end. You know what I'm talking about? Where I believe it's Booger. Where's the dresses up like, or no, it's the nerdy dude there. I'm trying to remember his
Lewis.
name. Lewis, thank you. Dresses up and goes into the mirrors, the House of Mirrors.
Yeah, it's the first one.
Yeah, okay, I thought so. That stuck out to me. That was like, it seemed like a defining, like, I don't want to say defining moment for the movie, but it was like a like memorable, I guess, as a sort of set like a tone of the movie.
Did you feel like the nerds won at that point?
Yeah, it was like the moment that they felt like they won to me.
Yeah, there's that whole, and it kind of just, it all kind of leads up to that, because you kind of get the sense that he's going to win that girl over. Now, you could argue he does it in, maybe not the
terrible
best,
way.
Yeah, terrible way.
Absolutely terrible way.
But this, and again, that's what I'm talking about. Like, here we go again. Another example where they were able to do something like this in the 80s and like no one bats an eye, right? I mean, he basically coerced a woman into having sex with him, and because she thought he was someone else, right? But yeah, whatever. It's the 80s, so we're not going to make a big deal about it.
Yeah, and that's what I mean is like, I guess I wouldn't say it's my favorite moment, but it's like the standout moment to me as like a wow, this is definitely a different time kind of movie. Like it's
right.
it struck me as the most memorable as you are in a different time now kind of way.
Yeah, and yeah, it's just there's so many things that happen in 80s movies that where you just, it's like facepalm, shake your head like, man, what were we thinking? Like, how was this okay?
Could you imagine them even trying to make a movie in this genre now?
No.
I just don't know how they would do it.
Yeah, I don't think they could. And then not even speaking like the stereotypes, like Takashi, he's the Japanese character, and they just, the whole movie, it's just nothing but terrible stereotyping for him, him and the Japanese race, or Asians in particular, if you want to go even that far. But, it's, back then everybody's laughing at it. No, look, yeah. But now you look at it and you're like, wow, that's a little cringy at times. But I think for me, the Greek games were the biggest standout. They had the cycle race, where, speaking of Takashi again, where he had to ride the little tricycle, and every lap he had to chug a beer. That moment at the very end when he's on his last lap and they play the Japanese music and he's coming in, he's completely, trashed and all that. I don't know why, but it just has me in stitches every single time I watch the movie. The burping competition between Booger and Ogre is great. There's the talent shows. Oh, the talent shows. Oh, wait, let's come back to that. We'll come back in a second. There's the arm wrestling, then they do the javelin throw, where I can't forget his character's name, but Lamar has this javelin that they constructed, and he throws it and that kind of thing. But that whole scene with all the Greek games, I thought was pretty fun, pretty amazing. But I want to come back to They're So Incredible. So They're So Incredible is the name of the song. So in the talent show, so if you haven't seen the movie, what happens is the nerds are competing against the jocks and other fraternity home or houses and sorority houses on campus. And they have these like Greek games, and it's a number of different types of challenges and that kind of thing. But one of them is a talent show. So the jocks get up there and they do like a cheer. They all dress in drag with cheerleading uniforms on, and they do a cheer, and everybody, is laughing at them because they look silly and that kind of thing. And then the nerds decide that they're going to put on a musical performance, and they come out. It starts with Poindexter playing his violin. He's got spiky hair. They've got lighting. Lewis and Gilbert they look like they're like Devo characters.
The outfits are amazing.
Yeah, no, everything about this whole scene is just top notch. I mean, it's like the standout moment of all for me. And they basically have this like breakdancing song that they're playing. And Lamar comes out. He comes out there with Wormser, and they're dressed like Michael Jackson. So they're doing the moonwalk and the wave and all of that. He's rapping. They've got Takashi is dressed like an Indian, and so he's got this big gong. I mean, if you're listening to this and you haven't seen it, you're probably thinking, what in the world are you talking about? But trust me, it's a really interesting, fun moment in the movie. But that song, They're So Incredible is the name of the song, believe it or not. There's two versions of it. So there's the movie version, which is really small. It's only, maybe about a 2 minute, not even that. It's probably about a minute and a half version. And that's got Lamar rapping, and it's got its own lyrics and that kind of thing. But the guy that did the song is named Ollie Brown. And Ollie Brown actually put this out as an actual song. So there's actually a full-length song with lyrics to it as well. Now, Ollie Brown is a person, I could not, honestly, we could sit here for an hour and talk about everything this gentleman has done in the music business. But he is famous, probably more famous now for doing the song Breakin', There's No Stopping Us. So if you've ever seen the movie Breaking, the movie There's No Stopping Us, that song, he wrote that song as well. He did the song for Electric Boogaloo, but he's written and performed music for Joe Cocker, The Temptations, Rolling Stones, Diana Ross, Van Morrison. He produced the Ghostbusters song with Ray Parker Jr. He did songs for Blondie, the Jacksons, DeBarge, Quincy Jones. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. He's performed on just hundreds of albums in his history. And he's one of those people that when you say Ollie E. Brown, most people have no freaking clue who he is. So I think he's an amazing person. Have you ever heard of this guy? And it's okay if you haven't, because like I said, I can guarantee you most people have not.
I don't think I've ever heard that name before.
Well, now you have.
Now I have.
Now you're a big fan of Ollie E. Brown. If you want, go take a look at some of the stuff he's done. It's just one of those characters. And there's a lot of these guys too that are like Randy Jackson. You know Randy Jackson, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So Randy Jackson, whoa, we got a big problem if you don't, because he was in your time. But Randy Jackson, he's another guy. Like we know him from the what's the name of the freaking show? Sorry, I can't think of it. The talent show, whatever it is.
Yeah, American Idol.
Yeah, thank you. That little program that came out. Yeah, so American Idol. We know him from that, but he's gone on and done so much stuff. I mean, his catalog and discography is extensive and dates back to even like Journey, when he was playing bassist for Journey on some of their tours and on I think one or two of their albums. But he's another character that another person. There's like lots of these guys that just go out and they do lots and lots of stuff and make all these other people famous, and they don't ever get the limelight. And that is Ollie Brown for sure. So anyways, I know I've been going on about him, but I just actually really like the song. You can get it on iTunes and Amazon and anywhere else. So if you're interested and you want to hear the full length version, just go look up They're So Incredible by Ollie E. Brown. Let's talk about the legacy of The Revenge of the Nerds. They went on and did a number of movie sequels. So they did Nerds in Paradise, which came out in 1987. That went into the theaters. I think I saw that once, and I can tell you right now, I don't think I've seen it since. Was not a big fan of that one. Did you get a chance to see the sequel?
I saw the sequel at some point, but I think just once.
You're not missing much. I mean, it's like gratuitous, boobs and female body figure, and they really like there was something. And don't get me wrong, the first movie's got its moments like that, but there was something more endearing about the characters in the first movie than in the second. In the second movie, it seemed like they were just there, and they really were going a different route with exploiting women and that kind of thing. So I don't know. It wasn't as cute anymore. Even though the first movie had parts and moments like that. The characters were just kind of ancillary to what I think they were really the true motive of the movie at the time, which was, selling tickets because of, females that were scantily clad on film. They did a TV movie. So they did a part 3 and a part 4. So part 3 was The Next Generation that came out in 1992. It was straight to TV. And then they did a part 4 called Nerds in Love, which went straight to TV as well. I never saw either one of those. Did you get a chance? Have you seen those?
No, I haven't.
Yeah. From what I've heard, you're not missing out. Again, more of the same. They had a remake in 2007, and this was actually done by Kyle Newman. So Kyle Newman is, for anybody that is a big fan of Star Wars, he's the director of Fanboys. He is still, actively involved in a lot of things that are very nerdy, like Dungeons and Dragons and Star Wars and all kinds of stuff. He comes on a couple of the different Star Wars podcasts and talks about his love for Star Wars. I mean, he's straight legit Star Wars fan. Don't get me wrong, but he was tied to the remake in 2007 that never got off the ground. I think they even shot, or they started filming, and then they pulled back after a couple weeks and just canceled the whole project altogether. So that movie never came out. I don't think Fox was happy with the direction it was going in. And that's not a reflection on Kyle Newman. It was probably a number of things that were playing into it as well. They had a reality TV show. So, and I didn't catch this. Did you ever see the reality TV show? It came out in 2013. It ran to 2015. So it ran 3 seasons called, what was it called? Sorry. Throne of Games, King of the Nerds. Did you ever see that?
No, I never watched it. I do remember hearing about it, what was happening though.
Yeah. There's, so of course, Curtis Armstrong and Carradine. So the Carradine, that's Booger and Lewis from the movie. They got together and they came up with this reality TV show where they would get these nerds together, put them through. It's like the same rinse and repeat recipe formula that they do with reality shows these days. They put them in together into this like pressure cooker of a apartment, and they have them compete against one another for different things. So they called the place where they live was called Nerdana or Nerdvana, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And it was actually, the first season was pretty successful. I think it was on TBS or TNT, one of the two. And it ran 3 seasons again. It was canceled, and they, Curtis Armstrong and Carradine were actually heavily involved throughout all of this. And it really was just a big play on Revenge of the Nerds. I mean, they made no mistake about it, and were pretty open about, trying to tie that back into and catch some of that, the magic and allure of the Revenge of the Nerds movies and sequels. But I never got a chance to watch this. I saw some clips on it, and I watched a couple things here and there, but I didn't. It seems like it was a pretty interesting show. Just never got into it. So definitely, a lot of people out there though are still big fans of Revenge of the Nerds. Okay, well, let's talk about. Do you got anything else for Revenge of the Nerds? Anything I skipped over? Anything I missed? Anything you want to bring up?
I think that was a pretty thorough coverage of Revenge of the Nerds.
Yeah. That's what we try to do here. All right, so we're going to get into our music now. So before we get into the music, there is one thing that I was wanting to do, because we didn't get a chance to do this with the other bands that we've mentioned. But I kind of skipped over this kind of important thing to me, and I don't know why. It was a very subconscious thing that I did. I wasn't trying to do this. So one of the things that's always interesting to me is where the bands get their names from. So what I'm going to try to do from now on is, as we talk about different bands that come up in Ready Player One, the novel, is maybe go back to the origins of the band names themselves, and trying to figure out where they came from. So the bands that we've covered thus far have been Bon Jovi, The Police, Journey, Def Leppard, Oingo Boingo, Duran Duran, and the Beatles. And that's in, I was going to say no particular order, but that may be the order going from the most recent to the very first one that we mentioned on these podcasts. But I thought we could maybe spend a couple minutes just talking about the names, where these bands got their names from. So Bon Jovi, I'm going to give you, well, hold on. Did you look into these at all? Did I give you this as a homework assignment?
No, did not get much looking into this.
Perfect. Because what we're going to do then is I'm going to ask you, and I want you to give me your best attempt at explaining where they probably got their name from. So we'll start with, we're going to start with Bon Jovi. All right. So Bon Jovi, where do you think they got the name Bon Jovi?
Maybe from John Bon Jovi.
Yeah. Ding, ding, ding. All right. So good one. So that was an easy one. So John Bon Jovi had a single in 1982 called Runaway. And this is, to me, it's a little blurred, because anytime I hear that song, I think it's the band Bon Jovi, and it really wasn't. He was a single artist at the time. He had a couple people that he was playing with, one of which would go on to become a member of the band Bon Jovi. But before Bon Jovi, the group, made it, he had a single called Runaway in 1982, and it was huge. It was very popular when it charted. I don't remember how far it got up, but it was pretty high. And it was after that he put a band together. And because the song had been released under Bon Jovi, they decided to keep that name for the band itself. So that way, people would know, oh, it's the same group, I guess, right, that came out with that song, last year. So it was a hit and decided to keep it. So that's how Bon Jovi came. Okay, The Police. How do you think The Police got the name The Police? Don't look these up. I don't want you to look anything up either.
And I don't even know how to hazard a guess on this.
You can make it up. It's better if you make it up.
The Police. Well, they've got some creepy songs, so I wonder if they've had some run-ins.
No, they've not. Nope, sorry. I guess you're talking about Wrapped Around Your Finger, or oh no, I know what it is. Every Breath You Take is being the creepy song. Yeah, that's the ultimate creeper song. But no. Okay, so Police. So this was named by the drummer. So Stuart Copeland is the drummer for the Police at the time. And there's basically two versions. I don't know that I was able to find a conclusive one here, but it was either named after his father, who was in law enforcement, or he saw it on the side of a car and just went with it, right? He saw a police car and it said Police and just said, oh, yep, that's the band name. So no, they don't have criminal records and they never got into any kind of nefarious activities. So they're fine. Journey.
I'm going to guess that they decided to form a band after a long trip.
I like that one. That's actually pretty good. It's not right, but it's actually really good. It makes sense. So the original band name for Journey was the Golden Gate Rhythm Section. That obviously doesn't roll off your tongue really well. They decided to have a radio contest where they would have listeners in the Bay Area call in and come up with a name, a recommendation to change their name. And that didn't go very well either. I don't recall if they didn't get enough submissions or the submissions were just terrible. Maybe somebody called in and said, hey, why don't you go with The Police? I don't know, but didn't work out. And they had a roadie of all people, just one of the roadies decided throughout the name, hey, why don't you go with Journey? And it could very well be that this Brody sees it as a big journey because this is what he does. But that's where they got the name. So interesting enough. Def Leppard. Where do you think Def Leppard got their name from?
Def Leppard got their name from a... Def Leppard got their name from a local pet shop that... I don't know.
That's awesome. No, 50-50, or would you like to phone a friend? No, this is Def Leppard. So Joe Elliott, who is the lead singer of Def Leppard, is quoted as saying, people always ask me how we got the name Def Leppard. Actually, it came from a poster I had made, which depicted a rather strange looking jungle cat with a hearing horn as its ear. I called him Def Leppard, and he has it spelled DEAF. Def Leppard. The guys in the band loved the poster so much, and after a bit of work, we decided to call ourselves Def Leppard, and they took the E. Def was respelled as DEF, and then Leopard LEPPARD. So there you go. That's where they got the name. I liked your version better though.
Different.
It's different. All right. Here's a man that everybody loves. Oingo Boingo. I did spill the beans on this one a little bit in the episode, the very first episode when we talked about Oingo Boingo. But any idea where they got the name?
Too much drugs.
Too much drugs is probably fair. The originally they were called the Mystic Knights of the Oingo Boingo. Hold on. So the Mystic Knights of the Oingo Boingo was a theatrical troupe that Elfsman's older brother was in. And so they pulled the Oingo Boingo part out. The name itself, though, was inspired by Amos and Andy. They had a secret society. So that was a TV show. There was a secret society called the Mystic Knights of the Sea. So they merged the two together. They took the Mystic Knights of and threw in Oingo Boingo. Oingo Boingo, the word itself means thinking while dancing, which would explain a lot. If you've ever seen Danny Elfman or any of the band members dance. But that's where they got the name. So Oingo Boingo it's a Swahili meaning thinking while dancing. So they pulled it from their older brother's troupe. All right, Duran Duran.
Couple of brothers sharing their family name.
Nope, I'm sorry. You're 1 for, what are we on, 6 now? No, good guess. But Duran Duran was taken from the movie Barbarella in 1968. There was a character named Dr. Durand. I had a D at the very end. So the reason why they went with that name, I guess Barbarella, is back when they had first started, when the band was, I guess they didn't have the name at the time. They used to play at a nightclub called Barbarella's there in England. There was a nightclub called Barbarella's. They would play there. So from Barbarella's, they went to the character Dr. Duran Durand from the film and just took D's off and ran with that name. All right, last one. Hopefully you can redeem yourself here. How about the Beatles? Where did they get the name from?
They had a terrible problem with spelling and puns.
I guess I'm looking at the judges. Yes, we'll take that answer. It's no, it's not. They were inspired by a band called the Crickets that predated them, obviously. And then to a little bit. So they changed the name. So Cricket, Beatle, and then they really try to play up the beat, B-E-A-T, of the band itself. So they changed from B-E-E-T to B-E-A-T to play off again that for the name, the band. So the Beatles. But good job, Joe.
Yeah,
you got Bon Jovi. Yeah, you did awesome, man. All right, let's talk about so we'll talk about the band names here for Pink Floyd and REM, which are the two bands that we're going to be covering tonight. Let's start with Pink Floyd. I'll ask you right now. Okay, so where did they get their name from? You can guess. You make it up as well if you need to.
I don't know. I don't know. I have not done well on the guessing so far.
All right, well, I'll save you here. So the band, originally Pink Floyd was named Tea-Set, T-E-A set, like a tea set that you would use to drink tea. Pretty weird. But they went to a concert and they were going to be playing, but there was already a band, believe it or not, that had the same freaking name. So I guess it's a popular name. So they had to change their name, and at the last minute, they one of the band members, I think his last name is Barrett. He was a big fan of two particular blues musicians. One was Pink Anderson, and the other one was Floyd Council. So he just merged the first names of those two blues artists, Pink Anderson, Floyd Council, and came up with Pink Floyd. So, and the rest, as they say, is history. So let's talk about Pink Floyd. So they played from 1965 to 2014, which is an incredible span of years. They had some, dry spouts in there, or dry bouts where they didn't really have, they weren't actively doing music, or they weren't touring or anything like that. But I mean, they were still cranking out albums up until 2014. You could probably label these guys as progressive rock, art rock, but they're more psychedelic rock, which, man, I'm going to tell you, I'm not the biggest fan of, and I never was. And I have some bad experiences as a child because of psychedelic rock, which we can get into if you'd like to, or if you want to be a therapist for a little bit. But yeah, they're just not a band that I really listen to. How about you? Were you a fan of these guys, or were your parents ever a fan of them?
Not particularly. There's a couple of songs that I like, but for the most part, not so much.
So if you had to pick a favorite album or song, what would you go with here?
Probably Wish You Were Here.
Wish You Were Here. Yeah, this one was tough. I would probably pick The Wall as the album that I like the most, I guess. It's got some songs on there. Another Brick in the Wall, Hey You, Comfortably Numb, Young Lust. There's some good stuff on there. But honestly, I guess I'll talk about it real quick. So all of the psychedelic rock that came out like in the 70s just scared the living crap out of me as a kid. I was only maybe about 6 years old when a lot of this stuff came out, 5 or 6 years old. And I had older cousins that were in like middle school, high school, and they were really into Pink Floyd. But they were also into like The Who. And so when Tommy, that movie that still to this day scares me, it scarred me. I don't even watch that thing. I stay away from it. But a lot of that music was just so psychedelic that it just scared the crap out of me. And I've just got some bad experiences where I won't fire up Pink Floyd to kind of relax, right? It's like really kind of makes me nervous. But yeah, there was a lot of this going on at the time. There was a lot of rock operas that were out in the 70s. That even in the early 80s, there was a lot of that stuff. Both just to speak about The Wall itself, like the album The Wall was turned into a movie, and that movie is weird in the way it's directed. And this is my personal opinion, of course, but it's very weird in terms of the way it's directed. It's I don't even really understand what's going on in the movie half the time. And the same thing is about with Tommy, the Who. Their movie about Tommy the Pinball Wizard is another psychedelic movie that it's just, I don't know. It's just bizarre. Have you seen either one of these movies, The Wall or Tommy?
I've seen bits. They weren't for me. Weird, I feel like, is a generous way to put how those things are put together.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you'd have to be completely baked to really enjoy either one of these.
I'm sure that definitely helps.
Yeah. I have a favorite song, though, oddly enough. Like, I stayed away from Pink Floyd for the most part, but in 1987, they released Learning to Fly, and it's from the Momentary Lapse of Reason album. I enjoyed this song a lot, and it is a song that I can listen to today and I still get it. I mean, I still love it, actually. It's a great song. But what stood out for me about that song was the video, which came out that same year, 87, maybe in 88. And it's a little bizarre, don't get me wrong, but it follows like a Native American, I think. It's this guy that's he's out in a field, he's cutting down wheat or something, and then he sees this dancing Native American Indian, and suddenly he's influenced and decides that he wants to go fly, so he packs a couple feathers in his arm and decides to jump off a cliff. When he jumps off the cliff, he turns into a I don't know, an eagle. It's probably not an eagle. It's more of a hawk. He turns into an hawk, and then he flies around, and and I think that's the way the video ends. So he's super shallow, I know, but whatever. It's the song's great. The video was interesting enough that when it came out, it got my attention. But did you do any research or any homework on any of the videos that they did?
I clicked through a little bit. I didn't really like the music much, and the videos didn't appeal to me much more than the music did. I guess I'm not a big enough pothead.
Yeah, I think you have to be. There is one thing, though, from Pink Floyd that is interesting, and this whole. Have you ever heard of Dark Side of the Rainbow?
No.
So here's the thing. You take the Dark Side of the Moon album, and you fire up the Wizard of Oz.
Okay, I have heard of this.
Oh, yeah. So there's a moment where you kind of sync them together and you play them. You crank down the volume on the Wizard of Oz movie, and you just listen to the audio from Dark Side of the Moon. You listen to the album, and I have to admit, I've done this a couple times, and it's pretty freaky. Like, there's moments where you start kind of pulling together and going, wow, there's like the bicycle, right? Where Miss Gulch is riding her bike, and we hear the bike sound coming from the Dark Side of the Moon album. When Dorothy wakes up at the very end of the movie is right around the time that Home Again, that particular song plays. So, and there's other moments. I mean, we're not going to get into every one of them here, but there are other moments that are just like eerily close and just synced up perfectly. And there's this phenomenon that plays around, that plays into all of this as well, that psychologists call, where we as human beings always try, and I forget the name now, but we always try to link things together, right? It's an innate ability that we have, that we want to be able to marry things together, put them together. We like when things are nicely neat, put together like that. And so, even though there was probably never any really true intention here for it, it's easy for us and in our minds to really kind of link those two together. So Dark Side of the Rainbow is what you've heard. It's also called Dark Side of Oz, and then The Wizard of Floyd is the other name that you'll hear from time to time. But believe it or not, there are other movies like this. They're called movie syncs. So there's some like 2001, the movie 2001 with a song called Echoes. You can play those together. There's another Brick in the Wally where you take Another Brick in the Wall, the album by Pink Floyd, and you link that up with Wall-E, the Pixar animation movie that came out a few years ago. Alan Parsons Project. We've talked about him a few times on the show, but he's got a song called Try Anything Once that you pair up with The Last Crusade. So Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade. You can pair those up and play that. There's another one with Alan Parsons Project where you play the best of album. And yes, Crowley and podcaster Mike, he does have a best of. But you play the best of album and you link that up with Tron, the movie. And there's tons of other ones on here. Maybe I'll throw the link in the show notes. But I found a website that just has a ton of them documented with all the instructions on what song to play with what movie and when to hit play on both of them. That kind of thing. Have you done any of these other ones or done anything besides or heard of anything besides Dark Side of the Moon or Dark Side of the Rainbow?
I haven't done any of them. I looked through you gave me the link to that site. I looked through a bunch of them and some of them just sound wild. I do think it'd be fun to go through this and do some of these.
Yeah. Any particular ones?
I like the idea of they have a Metallica one to sync Hardwired to Self-Destruct with The Dark Knight.
Oh, wow.
And that sounds like something. I don't know. I don't really know if it would be great or not, but it sounds like it could be.
Yeah. No, I'm with you there. Probably would be. Yeah. So we'll put the link in the show notes. There's a lot of good stuff in there that you can get into. But yeah, I guess so. Anyways, so Pink Floyd, not my favorite, but definitely I get it. There are a lot of people that love them. They're a huge band. I mean, there's no mistake about it. You can't deny that. You can't take anything away from them. They obviously they've made their mark in rock and roll and music for us. So let's talk about REM, a band that I'm very familiar with. So REM from 1980 to 2011. So they hung it up about 7 years ago. So that spans almost 31 years of rock. They really are, like, to me, they were kind of the birth of alternative rock. They started in Georgia, out of Athens, back in 1980. We had Bill Berry on drums, Peter Buck on guitar, and Mike Mills was the bass and vocals. And of course, probably the more, well, I wouldn't say he's the most famous, but definitely the standout person was Michael Stipe as the lead vocalist for a number of reasons and way. I mean, vocally, he's just got a very different sound to him. That made him stand out then, certainly makes him stand out today. But this is a particular band that I always felt was very defined by Peter Buck's guitars. Like, they have a very unique sound to them, apart from the vocals, which, again, Michael Stipe was lead vocalist on, but Peter Buck's guitars, just every song, when you hear the guitar, you're almost immediately, even if you've never heard it before and you're familiar with that sound, you can almost tie it right back to REM. They constantly toured in college before they made it big. They were huge in the college, on the college strip and all of that. But they were kind of the band that was indie before there was even really a thing called indie rock. Again, so they were kind of the birth of alternative, birth of all independent rock music at the time. And then they really kind of hit it big between 1991 and 1994. In fact, they've been compared to U2 at that time as being the biggest band in all of the world, really. So Joe, was this a band that you listened to at all growing up at any point in your life? Or
yes, this is definitely a band I was interested in. I'd like to ask you if you can guess where I was first exposed to REM.
Let's see. Let me think. Was it? Wasn't television, was it? You mean like a physical location?
No, the first time I heard them and it clicked with me. It's not television, but you're close.
Was it Man on the Moon?
It was Man on the Moon.
There. See, hey, look at that! I got that one.
You did. I think I was. What year did that movie come out? I think I was 12 maybe when that movie came out. And
that was the Andy Kaufman movie.
Yep. I like that movie a lot. I was big into Jim Carrey when I was younger.
Oh yeah.
I still am. He's great. He's got his own thing, but he's great.
Yeah.
But the Man on the Moon, the song, was like stuck in my head for weeks after I saw that movie. And then I started looking into the band, and I've listened to a lot of REM since then. I'm definitely a fan.
Yeah, they're a great band. I mean, they're one of my favorites, and we'll come to the favorite album and song, and I'll kind of explain why. All right, any you want to guess on this one where they got the name from?
I have no idea.
No, so that's fine. They had excuse me. They had so originally they were called. Well, they went through a couple different names. So they were called the Twisted Kites at one point. Sorry for anybody listening, but there was at one point they were called Cans of Piss. They had another questionable name that I won't mention on the air because it's just not appropriate. But at the end of the day, he's been on record as saying this is a dictionary pick. So they literally opened up the dictionary, closed one eye, closed both eyes, spun their finger around, and put their finger on a word, and it landed on rapid eye movement, which we know is one of the stages of sleeping where dreams occur, and that's it.
And you expected me to guess this?
Yeah, I did. I really did. I'm actually really disappointed that you didn't, but yeah. So that's where they got the name. So in fact, of all the bands so far that we've done, they're the only one that just said, whatever, we'll pick. We don't even care. We'll just do that. But that's where they got their name from. So, all right. So favorite song, favorite album. Do you got a favorite album?
I don't know if I could pick a favorite album. What album was Losing My Religion on? I like that album a lot.
Out of Time.
Yeah, I like that album a lot. I like that song a lot.
Yep, that's mine. 1991. It was the so in 1991, I bought a small. Hold on, let me think about that. No, yeah, it was in 1991. I bought my first CD player, a compact disc player with headphones. And when I went to the store, and I think William on the show has already talked about this, but I'll regurgitate it because he and I were living together at the time. This is like we were still in high school. So I bought a CD player, went out to the music store, and yes, there were music stores back then. And I bought Van Halen for Unlawful Carnal Knowledge. I bought Garth Brooks, No Fences, Boys to Men, Cooley High Harmony, Amy Grant, Heart in Motion, and Out of Time by REM. Those are like the 5 or whatever that number is CDs I bought all at once, and I came home. And that song, Losing My Religion, was just, again, I'm with you there. So it won 3 Grammys in 1992. The album won Best Alternative Music Album itself. It was their 7th studio album. They'd already done a lot with the album before that in Green. So it wasn't like they were new onto the scene, but that album was really the one that just kind of blew them up, and particularly that song. And we should talk about the music video too, because I thought that was amazing for the time. It was directed by Tarsem Singh, who was an Indian director at the time. He had done some other movies. He's probably most known for the movie called The Cell with Jennifer Lopez.
Oh, that's a weird movie.
Yeah, exactly. And you've kind of nailed it, because when you watch the video, I mean, it's not avant-garde in any way, but it isn't really at the for music videos back then in 1991. We'd already had almost 10, 11 years of music videos. And so you could argue that we were at a point where they were really trying to do something different. And when Tarsem Singh came in and did this particular video, it was very different than a lot of what we had seen. And I mean, I wouldn't go so far as to say that it was weird, but it was definitely on the weirder side of music videos at the time. And Tarsem Singh's done other movies as well. Unfortunately, he's never really had a good movie, in my opinion. The Cell was probably the best one. And that's probably a long shot, but he's done a lot of other movies, and there a lot of them are really weird. But he got a lot of notoriety and fame from this particular video for Losing My Religion. Any other songs that stand out for you though?
There's a few. Bad Day is good. Everybody Hurts. The One I Love.
Which one? No, I'm kidding.
You almost had me for a second. Half second. It's late.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, Man on the Moon, I don't know if that song is as good as I feel like it is, or if it's just because that was where
your entry point.
My entry point was, but that one always has a special spot for me too.
Yeah. That's a good song. I don't mind that song at all. It's catchy. Like it gets in your head and it's stuck.
Yeah, that's what got me. That thing was stuck in my head for weeks after I saw that movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree. It's a pretty catchy tune. Yeah, there's a lot of songs. I mean, this is a band that I really like a lot. So it's very hard for me to like. I mean, I could go on for 30 minutes and we're getting pretty low on time, so I won't. But like Night Swimming, Orange Crush. I mean, I even liked What's the Frequency, Kenneth off the Monster album. At My Most Beautiful, Pretty Percussion. I mean, there's just so many songs they did that I think are amazing. Before they even made it big, and then certainly afterwards. But I think if I had to pick like the second favorite song, it's definitely It's the End of the World as We Know It.
Yep.
That one is it's such a great song. I really enjoyed the video, and it's one of the songs where you do your best to really sing along and you completely lose it after like the fourth or fifth line of that one because it's just so fast paced. If you can even
get that fast.
Yeah.
That far.
Yeah. There was a time, so William is, I've already brought him up a few times, but so William, who's been on the show before, he can do most of that. There was a point in his life where he could do this whole song off memory, and it was amazing to listen to, amazing to watch. Chicks loved it, kind of thing. But yeah, now he can't. So, but
practice.
Yeah, it does take practice. I mean, you sit there and just like practice over and over and over again to get that down. I think I flame out right after Don't Misserve Your Own Needs. So that's I have a hurricane, listen to yourself, turn, and then I'm out. Bye. There's no way I can keep up with it at that point because it just doesn't. It's hard to do. He did an unplugged version. So 1991, REM did Unplugged, MTV Unplugged, and he actually did the song, and he had the lyrics in front of him. If you've ever had a chance to see it, he's got like a little stand there, and it's got the lyrics from. He gets through it. I will say that, but there are moments where he starts smiling because he realizes he's almost about to lose it and can't keep up with what he wrote, which is pretty funny.
It's a tough song.
Yeah, it is a tough song. And then one other quick note about REM, they did a song called Everybody Hurts, which is another one of their mega hit kind of songs, but that was actually filmed. The video was filmed in 1993 in San Antonio, where I was living at the time. And it was very interesting because I remember seeing the advertisement in the newspaper. Again, newspapers were big, but they had a newspaper, like a full play, like spread right in the main section of the newspaper for like open auditions. So basically it's everybody and everyone come on down to I-10, where I-10 and I-35 meet, and they're going to be shooting a music video for this band REM. It said no experience necessary. I think you got paid like, I don't know, $10 or something for coming out there, but they jam-packed the highway because this particular highway at the time was still being built. They hadn't really completed the construction on it, but they got approval from the city. They came out there, and I honestly did not go out there and be a part of the video. I know some folks that did. And when the video was shot and released, they weren't in the video. So that was kind of unfortunate. But if you ever had a chance to see the video, it has a bunch of people kind of stuck in traffic, and they all come out and, have a kumbaya moment with that song's playing. That was actually shot in San Antonio back in 1983. I could have been a contender, but I didn't. So anything else before we move on to the A-Team? Because we only got two things left. We've got A-Team and Deep Space Nine.
No, I don't think so.
All right, let's talk about A-Team then. So, oh man, where do we start? 1983 to 1987. There were 5 seasons, a total of 98 episodes. This had George Peppard as John Hannibal Smith, Dirk Benedict as Face, Dwight Schultz as Murdoch, and Mr. T as a character named B.A. Baracus. Were you a big A-Team fan growing up?
I loved Mr. T in that van.
Yeah, as most of the
van
world
was awesome.
did. Still is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually in the movie Ready Player One. If you pause the race scene, you can see it in the back there. I
picked up on it the first time I saw it.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
You're that big of a fan. What about the show itself? Was it anything you'd watched prior to this, prior to doing the homework?
Yeah, I caught it a few times, or I shouldn't say, probably more than a few. I caught it a bunch on TV Land when I was younger.
Oh, boy.
It was always fun. I loved Mr. T. I loved watching dudes fire machine guns for long periods of time and not hit anything.
Yep.
It was good.
Yeah, it is a good show. really enjoyed this, and I will admit that I remember when it came out and was an avid watcher from week to week with the new episodes as they came out. And one of the things that always sold me was the very beginning, like the intro. In 1972, a crack commando unit was sent to prison for military court for a crime they didn't commit. And that was always the catch for me. It was like they committed a crime, they didn't commit it, and they were on the run. And in the very last line of it, which says, if you have a problem, if no one else can help, and if you can find them, maybe you can hire the A-team. That intro did a lot for me, and probably did a lot for other people as well, that kind of hooked them in, because it gave you there was a lot of mystery there about, one, what did they do? And then two, how do you find the A-team? Which, they would explain in a lot of different ways, of course, throughout the episodes. But it was a great series. I think they did a really good job with this one. It was the actors. So it was produced by Stephen Cannell, which we've talked about before on the show. He did The Greatest American Hero. He did Hardcastle and McCormick. And then later on, he would go on to do 21 Jump Street with Johnny Depp on Fox. And then it also had Frank Lupo, who came from Battlestar Galactica, BJ and the Bear. Did you ever watch BJ and the Bear?
Never watched BJ and the Bear.
Do you have any idea what BJ and the Bear is?
Not even a little bit.
Yeah, so it's a chimp that rides around in an 18-wheeler. Huh? You missed out on that boat, buddy.
I'm glad BJ I watched
Yeah.
Battlestar.
Yeah. At least you got Battlestar, but no, BJ and the Bear, which as a kid I loved that show. It was terrible now. But anyway, sorry. Frank Lupo, Magnum PI, and then later on he would do probably one of the greatest television shows ever called Walker, Texas Ranger, starring Mr. Chuck Norris. But yeah, those two guys got together and came up with the idea of the A-team. But I got a question. So do you, what was the crime they didn't commit? Did you ever figure that out? Did you get that far in doing your homework stuff today?
I never figured out what the crime was.
Yeah, it's a little bit later. They first bring it up in an episode called Bad Time on the Border, where they basically, you get some information about how they were ex-Green Berets, and during the Vietnam War, their commanding officer, which was a character named Colonel Morrison, had given the orders to rob a bank in Hanoi, and if they robbed this bank, somehow it was going to bring the war to an end. So they succeeded and they robbed the bank, but when they go back to their base a little bit later, they discovered that Morrison had been killed by the Viet Cong. And so headquarters, in the headquarters had been burned down at that point. So all they know, I guess, the people that were still alive, all they know is that they looked like they were rogues, right? That the A-team, the four characters themselves went out and robbed this bank and didn't realize that there was a larger motive there that would happen, or that had been authorized. And so that put them on the run. So the crime is they robbed a bank in Hanoi in the midst of the Vietnam War. And no one was alive to be able to exonerate them or explain, why they had done that in the first place. So spoiler alert, if you haven't seen the A-team and you were wondering, there you go. That's what happened. And so again, there was a total of 5 seasons. Seasons 1 through 4 were pretty much the same exact style. They would get a mission. They would have some really cool montage where they would take a bunch of household items or whatever and crank out a tank, right? And then they would go on and, there were, like you said, that was always one of the weird things. There was a lot. It was the most violent, non-violent show ever on television. They were firing M60s, M16s, pistols, whatever it was. No one ever got hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah. No one ever got hurt. At most, they got knocked out or unconscious, and they gave you it was almost like G.I. Joe, because G.I. Joe, the cartoon, was the same way. Lots of laser bolts, lots of explosions, but everybody had a parachute. Everybody woke up at some point. There was again, a lot of violent non-violence. But the first 4 seasons, again, were very similar. And it wasn't until season 5 where they were captured and they got put on trial finally that things changed, because it was in that season. And I remember this leading up to it. They were plugging this thing all throughout television. It was a big time TV event that the A-team had been captured finally. And they really teased you, because they showed, I remember the teaser, they had them standing in a firing line, with a firing squad, blindfolded. Maybe Hannibal didn't. Maybe he had a cigar in his mouth still, but they,
probably.
you got the sense that they were going to be killed. When you watch that episode, the firing squad shoots, and you think that's going to be the end of it. Oh, but wait, they ended up using blanks. And what ends up happening is the government realizes that they've got a special skill set that obviously over the course of the last, however many years that they've been on the run. So the government decides to go ahead and fake their deaths, and they hire them again. So they join the CIA at this point, and they start performing these high profile covert operational missions for the CIA. And that's pretty much the premise of season 5, which is where it ends. So we don't really get any more of it. I wouldn't say they went and jumped the shark, but they were looking for a way to kind of change things up a little bit, to kind of, make it different than what we had seen. They also introduced that last season a character named Frankie Santana, who was I don't know if he was Mexican American, Puerto Rican. He was of Hispanic culture of some type, but he was another character who was also a fugitive, and so they kind of introduced a new character. So there was this 5th member of the A-Team at that point. So the final season 5 was only 13 episodes. The very last episode is called the Gray Team instead of the A-Team, which is it's basically a bunch of senior citizens that get together and join forces with the A-Team to take down the bad person in that episode, which sounds like they kind of went to the well one too many times. But more importantly, in that particular episode, the reason I'm bringing that up, one, it's the last episode. It aired on December 30th, 1986. But more importantly, another person that we've spoken about on this show is a musician named Joe Scarberry, who wrote and sang "Believe It or Not" from The Greatest American Hero. He also sang and wrote the theme song from Hardcastle McCormick. But he's got a song in this episode called "Never Too Late" that plays throughout the entire episode. In the montage, it plays, and then every time they show the senior citizens arming themselves with their walkers and canes, they play "Never Too Late" as well. So if you're wondering who that song is and that what that magical song is named, it's called "Never Too Late" by Joe Scarberry.
What was the date you say that aired?
December 30th, 1986.
You know what also happened on that day?
Your birthday?
That was the day I was born.
I had no idea. Wow, look at that. You owe it to yourself to go watch that episode when you get a chance now.
I'll do that.
That can't be a coincidence.
It can't be.
There's just no way. Oh man. So favorite character? You got a favorite character from the A-Team?
It's definitely B.A. Baracus.
Yeah, Mr. T. I figured as much since you said you're a big fan of his. It's funny. His character was written. I mean, they wrote that character for Mr. T. I mean, shockingly or maybe unsurprisingly as that is. Unsurprising as that is, they did write that character for him. He had some interesting quirks, like he didn't like to fly, right? That was always the running gag, and he didn't like Murdoch's flying at all. I don't think I'd ever heard the word jibba jabba until Mr. T said it. Maybe he came up with I don't know. There's probably some origins from it, but I had never heard of it, and now when I think anybody says jibba jabba, I always think of Mr. T. Hannibal was a cool character. I liked all of his different disguises, right? He was supposed to be the master of disguises. Yeah. He had an M60 that he called Baby, and then he was like Crowley. He basically was the Crowley of the show because he was constantly smoking cigars. And then Face, I don't know. Face never did a whole lot for me. But yeah, he was there.
Hey, he was there.
Yeah, he was there. The intros, we talked about that. The montages, those were always cool, where they could just turn household junk items into like full defense plans and weapons, that kind of thing.
I'm a big fan of montages.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's why I got you on. You're a kindred spirit because there are a lot of montages in 80s television and movies. I don't think they do enough of them these days.
No, they definitely are slacking in the montage department.
The something else was particularly interesting about the A-Team. They had a lot of celebrity appearances. So Boy George, Hulk Hogan, Rick James, the refrigerator, William Perry. You remember him?
Yep.
From the Chicago Bears. Pat Sajak and Vanna White. And then, of course, the Cylons from Battlestar Galactica, which, that's kind of a no-brainer given the writing team here and the producers. They were already kind of close to that. But yeah, and there's a whole list. I'm not even naming all of them, but there were just a lot of WWF wrestlers that were real big at the time. But there were a lot of celebrities that just came on and played themselves in these as well, in the episodes. We could talk about their legacy for a little bit. They released a game on the 2600 in 1983. Well, let me back up. They made a game in 1983 for the Atari 2600. It actually never got released. There are, I think there's ROMs out there for it. And I think there are, I think some people have some of the prototypes that were made, but it never actually made it to market. And really what they did is they took a game that was called Saboteur. And when because the A-Team was at the height of its popularity back then, 1983, they just rebranded it. And it's not a very, like they cut some corners to make it look like the A-Team.
Yeah.
They had a Commodore 64 computer game. And then in 2010, to coincide with the 2010 movie release of the A-Team, they had an Android-based game that came out that was actually really popular from all accounts. It was there's YouTube videos of people playing it and they're raving and ranting about how awesome the game is. It actually looks fun. I just wouldn't go back and play it. Did you watch the movie in 2010?
I did when it came out in 2010. I don't think I've seen it since then.
See, I've never seen the movie and I could not muster the courage nor the interest to watch it. And I think it's got Liam Neeson, right? So it's got Qui-Gon Jinn, but I still couldn't do it.
I think you should toughen up and give it a shot.
It doesn't have Mr. T in it.
I know. He'd be like really old to be playing B.A. Baracus.
If you've seen that guy, if you've seen him recently, he still looks pretty good.
He does look pretty good. I still don't think in 2010 he could have played Baracus all right, though. I mean, yeah, I guess he could have, but it would have been weird. A little old, for a mercenary.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think it got favorable reviews. I mean, it was probably okay. But given the hype, I remember when it came out, I don't know. I couldn't do it and still can't to this day. So yeah, at some point I'll get around to it.
It was fine. That's how I would rate it. It was fine.
Fine. And then as recently as 2015, Fox was looking to reboot the whole show. And I think they're still moving forward with this. From the last I was able to find, it looks like they've got the character's name or the characters kind of picked out, and they haven't really given any names, but the A-Team itself is going to be now mixed between men and women. So whether or not they follow the same premise is the original, I guess we'll see, but it looks like that may still happen at some point. We may get another reboot.
Well, that's the thing to do now is reboot 80s TV shows. We're on a roll with that.
Yeah, that's for sure. All right, we only got a little bit of time left, so let's wrap this up with Deep Space Nine. And Deep Space Nine debuted in 1993. It ran for a total of 7 seasons, so from 1993 to 1988. It's got a number of people in here. Avery Brooks as Commanding Officer Benjamin Sisko, Nana Visitor as First Officer Kira. I forget her last name now. Darn it. You got Odo, Quark. There's all kinds of characters. Worf. Right, so Michael Dorn comes back as First Officer Worf. Cole Meany is Chief Operations Officer Miles O'Brien, and we saw him back in Next Generation, so that was cool carryover from that series. Another person that stood out for me was his son. So Cirroc Lofton played Jake Sisko.
Yep,
I really liked him in this show. There had moments. There was a couple episodes that I thought he did really good as a kid actor, and of course he grew up in front of our eyes.
Yeah, he did.
Right in the last season. That dude, he's like a man, right? Compared to where he was in the first or second season when he showed up. But this one was interesting because prior to this, with Next Generation and the original series, we were always the recipe for Star Trek was we would follow this spaceship that was going around doing space exploration. And we got something really different with Deep Space Nine in that it was basically a space station right outside of a wormhole. But what other differences, or why were they, maybe you could just kind of recap why these guys were hanging out there and what was so vital or important that they the Federation decided they needed to have Deep Space Nine out there and have that kind of a space station there.
Well, so the space station was a captured Cardassian space station, and the Cardassians had kind of an oppressive occupation of Bajor, which is where the space station had been orbiting before they found the wormhole. And the Federation was considering bringing Bajor in and intervening in sort of the unrest going on there. And after the Federation gets there, they find the wormhole and they kind of park the space station by the wormhole. But we got a very different Star Trek out of this. And it was one that I was super hesitant to give a chance to because it wasn't the space exploration story. And when I finally talked myself into doing it, it's actually one of my favorite, possibly my favorite series.
Yeah. And I would say that I was on the same, in the same boat. Like when it first came out. So this was in 93, right? The first year? Yeah. So 93, I was very much into I'd always been, but I was very much into Star Trek. And this wasn't one that I really felt like I wanted to go watch. Like I wasn't driven like I was. I was super excited about another Star Trek series. And then when I thought, wait a minute, they're not going to be, running through space. They're going to be on. It just doesn't seem.
It sounds like it's going to be boring.
Exactly. No, you're 100% right. And then you watch the episodes, and they're great. Like they're like the Next Generation and even Voyager. Because I really like Voyager too. I know that's not maybe a popular opinion, but I love Voyager as well. But all of them, I thought all of the writing and what they were trying to deal with in a lot of their different ways were all great. And this is no exception. I thought Deep Space Nine did a really good job. And I think it did take a while to come into its own. Maybe it probably had a lot going against it because it wasn't the traditional Star Trek series and show that we had gotten.
Well, and they
got their legs pretty quick.
They changed up format a little bit along with setting. Instead of just being on a space station, or instead of being on the Enterprise exploring and having kind of the Alien of the Week format that Star Trek had forever, they went with a much more serialized story that kind of progressed throughout the entire 7 seasons, a lot more than the other shows had gone, and lost the Enterprise. So it was kind of two big changes all at once for them. And they did in the 3rd season, they brought the Defiant in to give them, which was like probably my favorite Star Trek ship. Because it doesn't fit at all. It's like a warship, which is a weird thing to think of for the Federation. But they brought that in to give them something to get away from the space station a little bit on, add some exploration, instead of just using shuttles. But it was a big change for them. And I think it took them a little while to kind of find their groove with that change.
Yeah, I think both from a writing, maybe even the acting, but definitely from a fan perspective, it did take a while before you kind of got it. You kind of understood what they were trying to do, but very rewarding. It's a great series that I think unfortunately goes overlooked a lot, and it kind of hides in the shadow of the Next Generation. No pun intended. But it was interesting too because this show came out. What was it? It came out right around the penultimate season of the Next Generation. So I think that when this came out, Next Generation ran for 2 more seasons, and then it went off the air.
Yeah, it overlapped 2 seasons. Yeah.
And then I don't remember if there was an overlap with Voyager at the very end or not.
I think there was.
There may have been a year in there-ish. But you made a good point because it was very serialized. If you, admittedly, I have not seen all of these episodes and all these seasons. There's just a lot of them out there. But I've seen enough of them. But I thought, okay, you know what? I'm going to go watch as part of the homework stuff because you gave me some episodes to watch, which I did and loved every one of them. Those were great ones. And we'll come back to those in a second. But I thought, okay, I'm going to go jump ahead and I'm going to go watch What You Leave Behind, which is the last episode of the series. Dude, like 15 minutes into this, I was lost, completely obliterated. I had no idea what anybody was talking about. They were making references to characters and scenarios and whatever else. I don't even know, honestly. they were just making so many references to stuff that had happened that I realized it had been stuff that had happened in either maybe the episode before, 4 seasons ago. I don't know. But it's not something you can just go jump into and go, hey, I'm going to watch, again, the last episode of this particular series. It doesn't work. And that speaks to, again, what you said, where it wasn't the monster of the week. It was we're going to start here and we're going to take you on this journey over the course of 7 years. And I'll have all these different characters and plot points, and it's all going to pay off at the very end, or 4 years or so, however long it ran. But very different compared to some of the other stuff. Would you agree though that was kind of the intent there, where they would want to, you couldn't just jump into something like that?
Yeah, well, I think they wanted to tell a story. I think serialized television was becoming more of a thing instead of episodic at that time, and I think they wanted to get Star Trek in on that. Mm-hmm. And I think it's easier to, or maybe they felt like it was easier to retain viewers if you need to see what happens next week in the story than if every week is a self-contained story. Yeah,
it definitely mission accomplished there in terms of what they were doing. Let's talk about those episodes though, because there was a couple. So you gave me the Trials and Tribulations. So from season 5, episode 6, Far Beyond the Stars, which was season 6, episode 13, and then The Visitor, which was season 4, episode 2. Because of time, I don't want to get into all of them, but Trials and Tribulations, that was amazing. Like what they did to integrate and combine some of the original stuff from the Tribbles episode into this one, and kind of show you that they went back in time and all of that, and how they kind of mixed in the footage. There were moments in there
I couldn't believe how well they did, just technically with some of that stuff.
Right. It's a great episode. I really enjoyed that one. I just found myself laughing and smiling half the time because I'd seen the Tribbles episode maybe a few times, just because it's very famous and notorious because of what happens. But I had never, and to be honest, even after, so now that I've seen this particular version or this episode of Deep Space Nine, I now want to go back and watch the original again, which I haven't had a chance to do. I do want to go back and just see, okay, now where did they try to mix in this, or who did they overlay? What was it, O'Brien, and I forget who was in that lineup when Kirk is walking up and down.
Oh yeah,
and can't remember who else was.
Bashir was there.
Yeah, right. So you can see them in there, and they did a great job. It looks like they were originally there. So it would be cool to go back and watch that now and get a different perspective. That one was good. The Visitor. I'm gonna admit I wasn't like teared up at the very end. And I don't know if it's just because I've got my sons, and I kept putting myself in that position of, I'm getting older and I've got my kids growing up and that kind of thing. So it's probably the wrong time for you to share that episode with me, you jerk.
It's a really heavy episode.
It is super heavy. I would admit that. But yeah, it was great. Like, it was really good television, and just the story itself where you've got Cisco, who somehow gets stuck in kind of warping back and forth between time, and he keeps coming back to his son. His son is getting older, and he's constantly when he comes back to his son, he's telling him, hey, I want kids, and you need to do something with your life, and don't worry about me, and that kind of thing. And, it progresses, and it starts off the episode, obviously his son is much older, I'm just about ready to die. And it's kind of this, he's talking to a journalist and kind of retelling what was going to happen, or what had happened with his father and that sort of thing. But man, it was really touching. Great episode. Really enjoyed that one as well.
Yeah, this episode gives me goosebumps like every time I watch it.
Yeah. And then Far Beyond the Stars was awesome just to see everybody. And I think they've all done this now, where they get a chance to play outside of their characters, so to speak. But the way they did this one, where Cisco was a writer and he had come up with this idea of Deep Space Nine, and this, I think it takes place in maybe the 30s or so.
Yeah.
Where they're writing for this these Pulp Fiction type science fiction magazines or whatever it is, and he's got this idea of Deep Space Nine, and so you get to see all the characters from the show, but they're not wearing any makeup, of course. it's a periods piece. So again, it's in the 30s. So everybody's dressed differently. They have different names. It's just a really neat. It's one of those you watch and you're like, hey, wow, that's cool. You're smiling the entire time because it's not the characters that you normally see on TV.
And it's a really good example of, which is why I chose it, of like a really fun episode that also has some like really biting commentary on equal rights and for minorities and for women,
Yep.
And it was a thing that Deep Space Nine was really good at, keeping the show fun. It had a lot of dark episodes, but they were not afraid to touch on social commentary at all. And I think this was a good example for that.
Yeah. So Odo, and I forget. So his character, I forget his name there, but he was kind of the guy running the it's not the newspaper, but the magazine, I guess, is right.
Yeah.
And he was constantly telling Cisco's character, whatever his character was back then, that there's no way that they were going to allow a Negro to write something like that. And it's shocking. You hear it and you're like, whoa.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a sign of the times. That's exactly what was probably was really happening.
And they mentioned that they were going to be taking a staff photograph, and they wanted Cisco and Kira to stay home.
What's her name? Yep. Stay out of the picture. We don't need you in here.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, they weren't pulling any punches in kind of hitting those themes pretty hard, which was reality at the time.
Yep.
So yeah, so it was, all three of those were really great stuff. Now they get into a little bit of trouble there for a little while with Babylon 5. So and J. Michael Straczynski, I really like him. Like, he is one of my favorite comic book writers. He did a lot of stuff on Spider-Man that I really enjoy, and he's done a number of. I mean, he's just written just about everything now at this point between Marvel and DC. But he's actually a really one of my favorite writers. But they got into some heat with Babylon 5, which I didn't really watch. But what was going on there?
So it ended up not amounting to a ton, but there was some pretty heavy allegations that got looked into, where he had pitched Babylon 5 to Paramount and provided them with the pilot script, all the artwork, the character backgrounds, plot synopses, everything he had, and they turned him down and said that it wasn't viable. And that's a science fiction show based at a space station. And then almost immediately afterwards announced Deep Space Nine. And there was some serious talk about where Deep Space Nine came from. Unfortunately, he was unable to prove that they used his information to do it. So he didn't really get anywhere with it. But
yeah.
It didn't sit easy.
Yeah, I didn't, and I was completely oblivious to all of this, so I didn't realize that it even happened at the time. So I don't know why, and I've never seen Babylon 5, but is it pretty much the same premise as well, where they're kind of on a space station as well, like all that? Yeah,
I think it's different. I mean, it is. I think in very broad strokes, it has heavy similarities, but the show is very different.
Yeah. Interesting. I may have to go back and just watch like a couple episodes just to kind of get a gauge and feel for whether or not this had violated or stepped on any territory there. It sounds like it was a big deal, but like you said, probably didn't amount to a whole lot when it was all said and done. And not that guy, I mean, that series went on to do what is pretty popular and still popular to this day.
Yeah, definitely.
So, it's got a pretty huge fan following there. Let's do last couple. I guess maybe last thing. Favorite character from Deep Space Nine?
For me is Jadzia Dax.
Why is that? Were they Were they like best friends? Her and Cisco?
Yeah. So she's a Trill, and so they have they're like a two life form symbiotic kind of relationship. Mm-hmm. So I have a host and the Trill. So Cisco was friends with Dax when he was a he. And then
I see.
The host passed, and so we got a new host who was Jadzia. So the personalities mix. So there was still some of his best friend in there and some new character in there. So it's kind of a uneasy friendship, so to speak. And then, spoiler, partway through the series, Jadzia dies, and the Dax portion gets moved to another Ezra Dax. Esri Dax, yeah. And so you get to see that kind of again. But I really liked Terry Farrell and her take on Jadzia.
Yeah, it's that whole dynamic was really interesting because she was the only character that if memory serves right, that actually just called him Ben half the time. Like, she never referred to him as, Officer Cisco, Command Officer, CO, or anything like that. It was always Ben, on a first name basis compared to all the other characters as well. Yeah, that was, and I don't know. I guess if I had to pick a favorite character, it was probably Quark.
Quark is good.
He was just the bar owner. He was the bar guy. I don't know that. Not that appealed to me. He was ugly. What's that race? Ferengi, yeah. Those guys are nasty looking.
And Quark always had more depth than he wanted to lead on.
Yeah,
he seems very face value. All I want is money. Give me money. Greedy, Ferengi kind of guy. Stereotype. But there are bits and pieces where he helps out for seemingly no reason, or like in the Visitor, there's a scene where after Commander Cisco gets zapped and has died, Jake is sitting at the bar and Nog is busy working, and they have time planned to go to the holodeck, and Quark tells Nog he needs to go pick up something because they're busy, and Nog tells Jake he has to cancel their time, and Quark hears, and immediately Quark is, actually, I'll take care of that. Go spend time with Jake.
Yeah.
Like, he's actually not the person he wants you to think he is.
Yeah, I know. I remember that part because he's actually surprised, like, whoa, you're letting me leave and go hang out with him? Because that was the right thing to do. He needed somebody.
Yep.
He acknowledged that he needed someone, and put that in front of everything else, which was interesting. But yeah, it definitely had other moments like that throughout the series. So he was a cool character. I really liked him. And of course, Dorn as Worf was cool, just to have him back. And then Worf. O'Brien. Yeah. All of the characters were really, really good. I don't think they had a weak character in there, to be honest. So, any final thoughts on Deep Space Nine?
If you haven't seen it, you should really give it a shot. I know it seems stagnant, it seems stale, it seems, where's my Enterprise? But it really is a great series.
Yeah, I definitely would agree. I've seen more episodes now ahead of this episode in prep and homework assignment stuff. But at some point I need to get around to just binge watching all of these and get them out of the way, because
there's so much.
But doing myself a disservice by not watching them all. So cool. Well, with that, I think we'll wrap it up. That's going to conclude this particular episode. Next, when we come back, we'll be doing part 4. So we've got a number of authors we'll be covering for the television. We'll be talking about Knight Rider, Star Trek Voyager. We've got Speed Racer, the cartoon, Godzilla, David Fincher, Kevin Smith, The Clash, and the Midnight Oil as the band. So we will pick that up you'll pick that up, I guess, in about 2 weeks. If you'd like to support the show, follow the show, check out the links in the show notes. We've got links to just about everything there, from our social media pages to our support pages and our Discord server. Again, we are a part of the Earglue Media Network as well. So if you want to hit that particular website and take a look at some of the other shows like Cantina Cast, Bad Gamers Anonymous, and a number of others, please support those shows as well. They're all a bunch of the folks that you hear on this show and some of the other ones. So should be some familiar voices and faces as well. So with that, we will end this one. Joe, thanks for joining me tonight. I appreciate you coming on and subbing for me here.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely, man. Anytime. And we'll see you guys in about 2 weeks. views and opinions of the Basement hosts are of our own and are not in any way affiliated with Random House or Ernest Cline. All quotes, music, sounds, trademarked, and copyrighted material referenced in the show are owned by the respectful companies and creators and are used by the Basement as fair use for entertainment purposes only. It would take me a month to read this whole disclaimer, but sad to say, I don't have that kind of time.